Okay, we're going to come to order. Today is the Wednesday, February 2nd, 2011 regular meeting of the Glendale Planning Commission. Please call roll.
Here. Here. Here.
Here. Report regarding posting of agenda.
The agenda for this meeting was posted on Wednesday, January 26, 2011, on the bulletin board outside City Hall and on the city's website.
All right, thank you. Would everyone please rise and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of minutes from January 19th, 2011. Any comments or corrections? Otherwise, a motion.
I move that we approve the minutes.
I have a motion and support. Call roll, please.
Commissioner.
Same.
Commissioner.
Aye.
Commissioner.
Aye.
And Chairperson.
Aye, on a vote of 3-0 with one abstention, the minutes of January 19th, 2011 have been approved. Oral communications, I have no speaker cards. We're going to do a little bit of, for lack of a better phrase, easy housekeeping before we continue with the actual agenda. I want to go out of order briefly. I want to go to 7A, which is the Wireless Telecommunications Facilities Permits case, PWT TF 2010-002. It's at 1209 East Garfield Avenue, and I understand there's a request to continue.
That is correct. We have a request from the city to continue the case to the regular meeting on February 16th, 2011, in order for the city's information services wireless administrator to attend the meeting.
Hey, I have no speaker cards. Any comments from the commission, or someone like to make a motion to continue?
Mr. Chair, I move to continue this case today, certain February 16, 2011. The case number PWTF 2010-002.
Without further public notice.
For the public notice. Thank you.
Motion and support. Call roll, please.
Commissioner Lee.
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt.
Aye.
Commissioner
Aye.
and Chair.
Aye, on a vote of 4-0, wireless telecommunications facilities permit case PWTF 2010-002 has been continued to February 16th per the motion. Another thing, just forecasting a little bit before we get into what appears to be a lengthy appeals case, is we also have an agenda item for zoning code amendments. There are a large number of them. Some of them are simple, some of them are complex. We will more than likely not handle them all this evening. We do have a couple speaker cards. We will allow those speakers to comment on whatever individual items they care to comment on, but just to forecast, we may not be acting on those particular parts of it this evening. But you're more than welcome to stay. I just wanted to let you know before you sat here for a couple hours and you may find yourself disappointed. But you'll certainly be allowed to speak at that time. All right, moving backwards and now forward. It's agenda item 6A. It's PVR case 2010-008. It's a standards variance. The location is 1833 through 1847 Victory Boulevard. The applicant is the Center for Community and Family Services, Inc., but this is an appeal of the planning officer's approval of a standards variance to allow a proposed daycare preschool facility to provide six limited time drop-off pick-up parking spaces instead of 17 spaces. A mitigation measure in the mitigated negative declaration requires that the applicant provide one 60-foot bus loading zone and 5 25-foot limited time parking spaces adjacent to the site on Victory Boulevard. The recommendation is that the Planning Commission sustain the planning hearing officer's decision to approve the variance with the same conditions. The Planning Commission has already adopted the mitigated negative deck. Staff overview, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. The item before you this evening is an appeal of variance case number PVAR 2010-008 to allow a proposed Head Start facility to provide 6 time-limited pickup drop-off spaces on-site instead of the 17 spaces required. As you may recall, the Center for Community and Family Services is proposing to locate a Head Start daycare and preschool at 1833 through 1847 Victory Boulevard. A portion of the required parking for this use is proposed at a parking lot located at 312 Allen Avenue. This project requires approval of a number of discretionary permits. On September 29th of last year, the Planning Commission approved a use variance to allow a parking lot located at 312 Allen Avenue in the R3050 zone for the Head Start facility. The Planning Commission's approval of this use variance and adoption of the negative declaration are on appeal to the City Council. Additionally, on October 7th of last year, the Planning Hearing Officer approved a standards variance to allow deviations to the development standards for the parking lot located at 312 Allen Avenue. The hearing officer also approved a parking reduction permit to allow the proposed facility to provide 24 parking spaces instead of the 37 spaces required. And then finally, the officer approved a standards variance to allow the facility to operate with 6 drop-off pickup spaces instead of the 17 spaces required. The appeal before you this evening is for the planning hearing officer's approval of the variance for the number of drop-off pickup spaces, not for the development standards for the parking lot nor the parking reduction permit. The planning hearing officer in her October 7th decision letter was able to make all 4 findings to grant the variance to allow a reduction in the number of drop-off pickup parking spaces for the proposed facility. A summary of her findings is contained in the appeal staff report. Her decision letter, granted with 17 conditions, was also attached to the staff report. She's here this evening to answer questions that you may have. The appellants believe that the planning hearing officer is either misinterpreting the data given or exceeding her authority by granting the diminished drop-off pickup parking requirements based on only 132 children rather than the 200 children stated in the application for the Head Start facility. Glendale Municipal Code requires drop-off spaces to be among the parking spaces already required. The applicant states that this fact was not submitted or considered in the approval decision. Further, the appellant feels the granting of the variance will be contrary to the objectives of the ordinance and material detrimental to the public welfare, and concludes that providing the less than minimum required drop-off spaces is a self-induced hardship. The full appeal application was attached to the staff report, and the appellants are available to more fully explain their appeal application. Planning staff continues to believe that the findings can be made to support the variance requested. The intent of the drop-off standards is to provide sufficient and convenient short-term parking for children drop-off pickup to and from the daycare centers. While the proposed facility will serve a maximum of 200 children, only 132 children will be at the facility at any one time. A facility of this size would be required 11 drop-off pickup spaces. 6 drop-off spaces are proposed on the site, and as a mitigation measure of the project, 5 drop-off spaces and a 60-foot bus loading zone within the Victory Boulevard right-of-way will be provided. While the 5 spaces within the right-of-way are not on the site of this facility, these spaces are convenient, and together with the proposed on-site spaces for a total of 11 drop-off spaces will be sufficient for the facility to provide that provides care for 132 children at any one time. Additionally, Head Start is a neighborhood-based facility and serves generally a lower-income population which relies more heavily on walking and public transportation. Head Start will be also providing bus transportation to and from the site, which is unusual for a daycare facility to do. Staff does not believe granting the variance to allow a reduction in the number of drop-off parking spaces will be detrimental to the public. Staff believes that the planning hearing officer adequately made all of her findings for the variance and recommends that the Planning Commission uphold the planning hearing officer's decision to grant the variance. Before I conclude, I just wanted to call to your attention after the packets were mailed to you, we got a number of emails, mostly, and those should have been on your table. That concludes what I have to say. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions for staff at this time? Mr. Lee?
Just to refresh my memory here, when Victoria Boulevard drop off, the 5 spaces that's being used there, what is the access of the children to the school?
There's a front access near the intersection of Irving and Victory, and then there's also one in the rear of the building near the alley access drop-off spaces.
So they don't have to go all day around?
They do not, no.
Anything else for staff at this moment? All right. Before we get into the public hearing portion, there was a statement that I overlooked reading, and the item that we were talking about is an appeal from the decision of the planning hearing officer. It is being heard as a de novo hearing. Testimony given at the planning hearing officer's hearing should be repeated because the commission does not review the tapes of those meetings. Decisions rendered today will be based on the evidence presented at this hearing and the evidence in the file, including appeal documents, staff reports, and letters received. Individuals speaking today should therefore present all the evidence which they may wish this commission to consider. A handout describing the appeals process is available at the front counter. Appeal items are considered as public hearings. The commission will consider testimony from the appellant, applicant, staff, and any member of the public wishing to speak. If you wish to speak, please fill out a card and present it to the recording secretary. A number of people already have. And now we'll continue on. A little bit of housekeeping. We have 2 cards representing the appellant, whoever those individuals are. They will have a combination of up to 15 minutes to present their case. We also have a stack of cards, approximately 6 cards, that have identified themselves in one way or another as applicant of the project. It is Mr. Habonian, Mr. Bagmanian, Mr. Gall, Mr. Burke, Mr. Horowitz, Mr. Smith, and I believe it's Ms. Testa. Thank you. You, as a combined force, will have up to 15 minutes for a rebuttal period. Or not a rebuttal, but a defense. And then we'll have public comment as well as brief rebuttals. So with that said, the appellant may begin to state their case. And the speaker cards I have are David Schleich and Susan Molick. Hold on just a moment, ma'am. I'm wondering if we have a microphone issue.
Helps to turn it on, right? All right.
If you wouldn't mind starting from the top.
Oh, okay, thank you. Good evening. I'm Susan Molick, a resident of Glendale for 27 years and homeowner at 315 Allen Avenue for 12 years. I'm here to voice my opposition to the approval of PVAR 2010-008 and to request from my neighbors and myself that the Planning Hearing Commission reverse the approval of the variance granted by the Planning Hearing Officer. The plan to put 6 drop-off pickup spots in a public alleyway with access from both ends will create congestion and a backup of vehicles in the alleyway, especially since it is in close proximity to a proposed employee parking lot at 312 Allen Avenue that will be filled to the maximum due to less parking spaces than the city code requires, and employees attempt to juggle parking in a tandem parking arrangement. Additionally, the proposed mitigation of 5 drop-off pickup spaces on Victory Boulevard, a high-speed and highly trafficked street, is not a safe or viable option for loading and unloading 0 to 6-year-olds. When the limited number of drop-off spaces are filled, this will force parents to circle the building, possibly several times, creating a merry-go-round effect, and may result and may result in double parking on our streets. This whole situation is not going to be an orderly queue-up like going through the food lane at Jack in the Box. Instead, it will create major safety hazards for our neighbors and small children. In addition, the daycare center lists 6 separate drop-off pickup times during the day to accommodate 3 shifts of children. This is a setup for an unsafe and dangerous situation waiting to happen, and it only multiplies the chances for an accident waiting to happen. The last thing we want to see is a neighbor or small child get hit and possibly killed in our neighborhood. I would like to address some points that the planning hearing officer made in her determinations of these matters, and this is listed on page 4 of the Planning Commission staff report. Number 1, that strictly applying the drop-off standard will create an unnecessary hardship for the applicant. Any hardship to the applicant is self-induced. They knowingly chose a site that has multiple parking problems associated with it that are not in compliance with several city codes and ordinances. Therefore, they had to apply for several variances. The unnecessary hardship created will be to the residents in the neighborhood, which we will have to live with for 17 years, since our understanding is that there is going to be a 17-year lease on this property. Exceptional circumstances, number 2. Previously, the site was used for a regular business and is set up to accommodate a business, not a school, a very different use for this site. The applicant chose the site knowing several variances would be needed to fit their school into this site, rather than choose an appropriate site that would not require so many variances. Also, I think it's hard to believe that in this economic climate with so many empty buildings around that there isn't some other suitable building in the area in Glendale in which would not as many variances would have to be requested in order to make this entity fit into a space. Number 3, the granting of the variance will not be detrimental to the public or injurious to the property or improvements in the neighborhood. The issue stated earlier will cause unsafe pedestrian and traffic conditions to the neighborhood residents and anyone who travels on our local streets. In addition, once the neighborhood is known to have such congested traffic and unsafe conditions, it may result in lessening of our property values. 4, the granting of the variance will not be contrary to the objectives of the drop-off pickup parking requirements. Since the drop-off standards contained in the city zoning ordinance does not distinguish between the maximum number of children a facility is licensed to serve and the maximum number of children a facility is licensed to serve at any one time, the city should uphold the ordinance based on 200 children and stick to the requirement of 17 drop-off spaces, not 6 or 11 with mitigations. In addition to PVAR 2010-008, the applicant has requested several other variances in order to try and fit their program into an existing building and parking arrangement under the minimum requirements required by the City of Glendale, which constrains its operations in the present and causes our public concern for its future in the neighborhood. The city has approved these variances with numerous mitigations and condition upon condition for each mitigation in order to allow the daycare center to operate at this location. This is akin to spot zoning, which is not good city planning and therefore not good for our neighborhood. We would like to have appealed the other variances, however, due to the $650 fee for every variance, and in this economic climate with many of our neighbors being on a limited income because they're elderly or people underemployed or unemployed at this time, unfortunately we were not able to pay the additional fees in order to appeal the other variances, which we also oppose. At a recent city meeting about pedestrian and bicycle safety, which I know some of you attended, a city staff reported that Glendale is in the bottom 10% of cities for pedestrian safety, and the California Office of Traffic Safety figures released in early January ranks Glendale as having the 3rd worst overall record for pedestrian safety among cities with a population of 100,000 to 250,000. Well, with the granting of all of these variances going against the city codes, the pedestrian safety in our neighborhood will go down dramatically. Respectfully, I request that the Planning Commission reverse the planning hearing officer's approval of the variance to allow less than a required number of drop-off pickup spaces as the municipal code states. Thank you. Dave?
Ms. Molick, when your co-appellant is done, maybe you could come up at the same time, so as we have questions, we can ask them. Thank you. Please continue.
Good evening. My name's Dave Schley. I am a 20-year homeowner in the city of Glendale. I live at 319 Allen Avenue. I'm here to request, along with other homeowners and residents, that the Planning Commission reverse the variance approval granted by the planning officer. I have a few points of contention, but I'll cut out a few because she was quite elegant, I thought. So I'll cut out a few. But one of our points is the locating of 6 pickup and drop-off parking spaces at the rear of the building to be accessed via the city alley. Parents seeking other locations to pick up and drop off their children, if the Victory Boulevard pickup and drop-off spaces are full or congested, will turn on to Allen or Irving, 2 residential streets, and then access this narrow alley. This alley has 2 entries. The alley traffic will be in opposing directions. This will cause a traffic jam, as you can think, because they're coming both directions, vying for those 6 right-angled spots. This will cause an unsafe backup condition that could spill out onto the residential streets. Even if this alley is to be used as a pickup and drop-off driveway by this facility and is made one way, maybe by the city, it will cause a merry-go-round effect of the traffic anyway. The increased traffic flow or congestion, unsafe conditions on our residential streets will be caused by the locating of these 6 pickup and drop-off spaces. I have to just say, I believe this is the most tremendously poor planning. I mean, putting an alley and having 6 spots of what were supposed to be 17 at a right angle with 2 opposing directions, that's going to cause a problem. It puts the burden and hardship on our residential streets, our homeowners and residents. The other point that I want to bring up of contention is the granting of a number of code and ordinance reductions and variances related to this commercial property and the applicant's facilities requirements. There has been a requested standards variance, parking variance, use variance, parking reduction permits. There has been required mitigations and 17 conditions. They are all being requested because the applicants and the property's inability to comply with the minimum parking requirements of the codes and ordinances. The codes and ordinances of the City of Glendale are not being upheld. They are being reduced because, according to the planning hearing officer's findings, they pose an unnecessary hardship, or they are exceptional circumstances, or it is not detrimental to the public or the zone or the neighborhood, or they will not be contrary to parking requirements. We could not disagree more. I mean, we just disagree. We have heard that there will be a 17-year lease. I don't know that this is a fact, but I did overhear it the last meeting. We, the homeowners, business owners, residents of our neighborhood, will have to bear the burden, the unnecessary hardships, the exceptional circumstances, and parking traffic problems for the next 17 years. Guys, 200 daycare school facility in front of your house. I don't know how you feel about that, but I know how I feel about that. The traffic increase, the merry-go-round effect, the jockeying and vying for position, it's just not what we have ever had in our residential streets. And I stress the word residential streets. Victory is a commercial street. This private operated school facility will be a commercial facility. It should be on commercial property. It should be all parking requirements should be contained within its property boundaries. And if not, they should be on commercial property, the parking requirements, if it's off-site. This is a privately operated commercial school facility. It is a different kind of business than has occupied the property in the past. Formerly the architectural firm, a more conventional type business, had 30 to 40 staff, and that was it in that specific parking lot that they're trying to grant variances for. They arrived in the morning and left at night, generally speaking. This proposed facility has 30-plus employees and then 200 students. This is a school, and a unique one at that, a preschool daycare center. There will be the traffic and the congestion of a school, not a conventional business. We request that the Planning Department uphold the letter of the law, the City of Glendale's codes and ordinances. Do not grant variance after variance so that this business will somehow fit on this property. It will cause unsafe conditions and devalue our residential neighborhood. We're the ones that are going to have to accept this burden. We're the ones that is actually being forced upon. I'm here to request, along with the other homeowners, residents, that the Planning Commission reverse the variance approval granted by the planning officer. Thank you.
All right. For both of you, you and your co-appellant, questions from Commission? All right. We have nothing at this time. It may pop up. You will also have a rebuttal period at some point in the future. Right. We'll allow the applicant a combined 15 minutes to state their case as well. Again, there's a group of you. Recognize you have 15 minutes and use your time as you so choose. I don't know who wants to start off, if you have a chairperson, if you will.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Kevin Smith. I'm with the Center for Community and Family Services, and we are here before you to talk about our business, how we run that business, how responsible we are in doing so, and to talk about the drop-off and pick-up plan that we have presented before and have refined and would like to move forward with. We have been in operation in the San Gabriel Valley running the Head Start program since 1988. We serve over 1,400 children throughout that area. Over 400 of those are in Glendale. And we are, at this time, looking to relocate one of the sites to the Victory Boulevard site, as well as to expand services to 114 early Head Start children, which are 0 to 3. Overall, the site will serve a population aged 0 to 5. We serve low-income families primarily, as well as other families with children with special needs and disabilities. And in a time when we've seen challenges for child development programs like ours, economically, in the state, and just locally, we've been able to bring in additional resources into the community. Over the last year and a half, we've brought in over $2.3 million to this area, and 17 years that you continue to hear about is very correct. We want to be there for a very long time because we brought resources into the community, and we want to sustain those for a very long time. We've done extensive studies in the community to identify need. We have identified over 400 families just within the zip code alone who would qualify for our services. We've also either enrolled, have it on their waiting list, or have graduated over 75 children from the zip code just in the last year and a half. We have identified a certain number at this site based on the capacity that this site can hold. It's 132 children at any one time is the capacity that this site can hold. We have detailed architectural drawings based on square footage requirements of community care licensing, and we will have 29 staff on site to provide the services that we have. I've heard statements about this is there's other businesses that this should be there. It would be okay if this was a Jack in the Box. This is a business. We have been running this business for a very long time. We have services at 14 other locations that have very similar challenges, and everyone is different, and we have to accommodate those. We have reached out to the community prior to the original presentation to the commission. We held one planning meeting or community meeting and canvassed the community to invite suggestions and comments. Since then, we've had 2 additional community meetings where we handed out over 150 flyers to the community to let them know we will be on site to seek suggestions for the project. In addition, I have a set of petitions that I'd like to submit with. There's 496 signatures, and I'm sorry, I do have one original that I need to get a copy of. One of the parents that came to the community meeting volunteered to seek support from the neighborhood, and she herself went out and got 20 signatures just on the couple of streets surrounding the area. Lastly, I'm going to yield to the other 2 speakers, but we are a business, like I said, and we know how to manage our programs. Yes, there are challenges. We will address them. We have addressed them, and in addition to the variances that have been previously approved, we have staff that will help to support this drop-off and parking plan, and we also have a parking agreement that we previously submitted to you for your review at the last meeting that has very specific detailed instructions as to what a parent can and cannot do, and that will be applied to this project if approved by your body. So at this time, I'm going to invite our architect up to make some statements.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Herb Horowitz. I'm an architect with McKinley Malik Architects, 35 Hugas Avenue, Pasadena, California. I'm also one of the property owners for over 20 years. My partner and I have operated an architectural firm from that location for the past 20 years. I was going to make a presentation. I think I'm going to cut it short because we have our traffic engineer here who will address some of the specific issues that were brought up by the homeowners. I would like to clarify a couple of items. Number one, there are 200 children at the site. 132 will be there at any one time. Some comment was made about the alley being congested. I would like to clarify that the alley only serves the properties on either side of the alley between Irving and Allen. There's no alley to the south, and the alley to the north terminates at a wash, maybe 200 feet north. So that alley is pretty much dedicated to the property owners on both sides of the alley, and my partner and I own both sides of the alley. Because time is limited, and I know we have a very limited time, I would like to defer the rest of my time to Tom Gall with our traffic engineer. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Tom Gall. I'm with Fair & Piers. We are the traffic and parking consultant on the project, and I would like to address some of the concerns that have been raised, primarily having to do with the adequacy of the drop-off, concerns about congestion that may be caused, and the number of spaces that are being provided. As I believe you know, the project is proposing to provide a total of 40 off-street spaces, 32 of which would be in the tandem lot across the alley, 6 regular spaces off the alley, and then 2 handicap spaces off the alley. And in addition to that, there's the proposal for the 5 drop-off spaces on Victory. The 32 spaces in the tandem lot, we do believe, will be sufficient to accommodate the 29 staff plus volunteers. The adequacy of the drop-off and pickup spaces has been questioned about whether the 1 per 12 requirement that the city has for that should be applied to the 200 or to the 132. It is our belief that it's appropriate to apply that to the 132 students that would be present at any one time, as opposed to the 200 students total. And the reason for that is that it's our belief that the intent of the city code has to do with a facility where all the students are arriving in the morning and all the students are arriving in the late afternoon or evening, not a situation where you do have this two different periods where we have a morning session and an afternoon session where the students are not there and not arriving and departing at the same time. So when we apply the 1 per 12 requirement to the 132, that does give you the number of 11 spaces. And that is the proposal in front of you, is to provide 6 of those spaces on the alley, 5 on Victory. The 6 on the alley, the question has been raised about congestion on the alley. Although the alley is two-way, the proposal is that we would bring traffic, would enter from Victory on Irving, go into Irving, and I believe this may have been a plan that was presented to you in your packet. Turn left into the alley and proceed northbound through the alley to to arrive at those spaces off the alley, and then continue out northbound to Allen, turn left, and then be able to use the signal that is at Victory and Allen to get back onto Victory. So even though the alley is a two-way alley right now, that's not the way we intend to route the parents through there. We would route them in one direction, so we wouldn't have parents coming at, I think it was expressed, from both directions and trying to get into those same spaces from two different directions. That's not the way we would operate that area. Also, I believe in the appeal itself, it raised a concern that the alley is only 20 feet wide, and that makes it difficult to maneuver into those spaces. In fact, that was recognized in the design of the site plan, and the site plan allows for an additional 4 feet in front of those spaces, so that you actually have 24 feet to turn in and out. A concern was raised about the Victory spaces, and Victory being a commercial street. It is not uncommon. In fact, I think most schools and daycare facilities and whatnot in the Glendale area and really throughout LA do have on-street drop-off. It's not an uncommon situation at all for that to be the case. And as Kevin Smith alluded to earlier, Head Start does monitor and manage their pickup and drop-off programs quite rigorously at all of their facilities. Monitors would be assigned. 2 of them along the Victory frontage and at least one along the alley, to ensure that the parents are using the spaces they're supposed to use, that there's a smooth flow of traffic in and out, and all of the parents would be assigned a particular location so that they wouldn't just be meandering around looking for wherever they want to go. They'll know whether they're supposed to go to the Victory location or to the alley location. In terms of the adequacy of whether those are enough spaces, I've already talked about why we feel 11 is the right number from the code perspective. But we also feel it is the right number from the perspective of what we need to handle the demand. As was discussed earlier, there will be a bus provided by Head Start that will serve the 2 half-day sessions, so that a portion of those students would be arriving by bus. In addition, it is Head Start's experience that part of their students would arrive by walking. That occurs at all their facilities as well. And when we've looked at that, we determined that we estimate that about 40 cars would be arriving in the morning for the all-day session, and then in the evening to pick up the students from the all-day session. There's a 45-minute period for that to occur. So 40 cars in 45 minutes is sufficient time to allow that to happen. For the half-day session, we estimate about 35 cars arriving and departing in a 30-minute period for each, 30 minutes to drop them off, 30 minutes to pick them up. And again, that's about 1 per minute, a little over 1 per minute, with just under 10 minutes available for each car. Again, that's sufficient time for that to happen. So we do feel that we have enough capacity in the system to allow for those vehicles to come and go without congesting the alley and without congesting Victory. We did also look at Victory itself, just to take from the perspective of if we're going to dedicate a certain number of spaces along Victory to the drop-off and pickup during certain periods throughout the day, does have an effect on the parking supply along Victory. We did surveys on 2 different days, a Tuesday and a Thursday, between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m., where we looked at Victory itself as well as some of the surrounding streets. There are about 10 spaces on Victory right now, and maximum number of cars we observed parking there at any one time was 3. So it is possible to provide these pickup and drop-off spaces along Victory without affecting the cars that are parking on Victory right now. There is sufficient room for them. And the last point I wanted to make was that the proposal is for 5 spaces, but in fact there's enough room along Victory and there's enough available spaces in the area to handle the 3 cars that are parked there, that if it was desired by the city, more than 5 pickup and drop-off spaces could be provided along Victory. It would be possible to do that. If you looked at just the frontage of the project site itself, we could accommodate up to 6. If you looked at the whole section of Victory between Allen and Irving, we could accommodate up to 8 if that was desired by the city. But we believe that the 5 will be adequate. Do you want to say anything else?
Thank you. As a part of my presentation, I was going to distribute some handouts. I think that Mr. Schitz has them, but if you would pass them to the other planning commissioners, you'll see that we do have 2 exhibits, Exhibits A and Exhibit B, which describes the times that the students would be dropped off for each program, along with the number of programs that will occur on the site. There will be 3 separate programs: an all-day program from 8 in the morning until 5 in the evening, a morning program from 8:15 to 11:15, and an afternoon program from 1:15 to 4:15. If you look at the matrix, you'll see that there are 9 to 12 minutes of parking available for each drop-off child. So we think that based on the information that you received from Tom Gall, that there is more than adequate time for the 11 drop-off spaces that are provided on the site. And as Tom said, that if additional parking is required, 3 additional spaces would be available on Victory Boulevard. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Nothing more for the applicant at this time? All right, I do have questions from...
Yeah.
Please, who do you know who you want to direct it to?
The gentleman just...
The traffic engineer or the architect?
Traffic engineer would be fine.
That would be Mr. Gall. Is that an appropriate title for you, sir, traffic engineer?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I don't want to call you an engineer if you don't have, the credentials.
Okay. Just for clarity's sake, I'm trying to determine how many drop-offs and pickups there will be, what the spacing is. I initially thought there'd be a drop-off in the morning, pickup in the afternoon, although I realize it was more complex than that. But in looking at your chart here, will you explain to me kind of generally when there'll be a drop-off and pickup for each one of these sessions?
Sure. We have 3 different sessions, 1 all-day session and 2 half-days. And the pickups and drop-offs for each of those are all entirely separate, independent from each other. So we don't have, for example, the morning and half-day session coming at the same time as the all-day session. The drop-off for the all-day program would be between 7 and 7:45 a.m. Then the drop-off for the morning program would be between 7:45 and 8:15. The morning program would be picked up between 11:15 and 11:45. Then there's a little gap in there before the afternoon program begins. The afternoon program begins at 12, or the drop-off for that, would be between 12:45 and 1:15. The pickup for the afternoon program between 4:15 and 4:45. And then the all-day program, it's the longest duration of the programs, the pickup would be between 5 and 5:45. So all of those periods are independent. We wouldn't, as I said, have different sessions come in at the same time. And it's all staggered, as you can see, throughout the day.
So you have the all-day program, do a drop-off and a pickup.
The all-day program would be drop-off 7 to 7:45 and pick up 5 to 5:45.
And then the morning program will drop off in a staggered process, and then there will be a pickup
for the morning
for
program.
them.
Midday for them, exactly.
To drop off and pick up.
There's a drop-off and pickup for the morning, correct? Yes.
Then the afternoon drop-off is after the morning, so this, in afternoon drop-off and pickup would make the third
Correct.
grouping.
Correct.
So essentially, there'll be drop-off and pickups for a significant period.
Well, the
Throughout the
overall
day.
duration that's proposed, the spaces for the drop-off and pickup will be marked for that purpose for certain periods of time. That would be from 7, I believe the proposal was from 7 to 9 a.m. It covers both the all day and the morning
Day in the
drop-off.
morning, right.
Then from 11 to 1:30, covering all of the activities that are occurring in the middle of the day, whether it be drop-off or pickup. And then from 4 to 6, covering both of the afternoon pickups. So that would be the hours that would actually be posted for when the spaces would be restricted to pick up
One
drop-off
last
only.
question. The timeframes that you project for how long it takes for a car to come to the drop-off and drop off the kids and pick them up, where did you get that information? What did you use to come up with those figures? How long it takes?
What we were looking at was the total amount of minutes that you have available, in a sense, right? That if you have 11 spaces and 45 minutes available for all the drop-off to occur, and considering that we'll have 40 cars arriving for that, that gives us an average of 12 minutes available for each of those cars. But the truth is, that's not how long it takes. The actual, on average, the pickup or drop-off maneuvers are faster than that. So we have more than enough available time to accommodate those.
Mr. Lee?
Yeah, I have a follow-up question. I'm looking at, well, first let me get to the follow-up question. You have shown the direction of the flow here, and
Yes.
one of the concerns that the neighbors had was the, opposing, direction, cars coming together here.
Yes.
Do you have a dedicated staff who will enforce, monitor this throughout the whole day? How are you proposing to ensure that this will happen? Because the last time we
want somebody besides the traffic engineer. So
okay.
whoever's appropriate, when
Right.
you hear a question, please just come up to the podium.
because the city cannot enforce that, so you have to kind of police that yourself.
Right. We have maintenance staff on site. We have a transportation staff, including bus monitors on site. So between the primary staff identified will be the maintenance staff and also the family services staff who are assigned earlier in the morning to be there and staying later. The hours are it's a shift. They're 8-hour shifts, but one person may come at 7 and leave at 3:30. Another person may come at 8, leave at 4:30, so on. But we do have enough staff, and it would be the maintenance staff and the family services staff that are there to guide the parents. And if need be, we also have a transportation group with bus monitors. So while they are there, they can also assist in the program.
And Mr. Gall, I guess this is something that you prepared. You looked at the traffic count.
That was actually done for us by a traffic count vendor, yes.
So I guess by looking at this thing, comparing from last year's number to this year's number, that really there is a slight, actually, reduction in cars, but it's pretty much stayed the same from last year to this year.
That's a correct characterization. We went out and counted again because there was a concern expressed at the hearings in September that we shouldn't base our analysis just on one day. We counted 2 more days. And yes, you're correct. Both of the days we counted again, there was actually slightly lower volumes than there were when we counted last year, but not substantially lower, and in the realm of the variations that you do see when you go out on multiple days and count.
Did you count during the times that there would be drop-offs?
Yes, we did.
The dates, it's 127. Sure, 1 second. 127, what was the other date?
It was actually this past Monday. That was 31st. Yeah.
One of the past speakers talked about a merry-go-round effect, and the way it's proposed right now, obviously it looks like that merry-go-round wouldn't happen. Is one reason why you have the direction of the arrows in where they are to avoid that to happen? Is that something you're trying to prevent by making it, So it's going the same direction as the alleyway. You're going the same direction as you are on the actual street where you're picking it up, so people won't actually go in circles.
Yeah, that is part of the intention. I think the merry-go-round effect that was alluded to had to do with the concern that people would just be circling around the residential blocks to do their pickup and drop-off. And the plan that we're proposing, we believe, will avoid that by, first of all, we believe there is enough capacity available to accommodate the demand, and then with the monitors there and the parents assigned to one side or the other, so that we can use both the Victory and the alley sides effectively. But with the reason we chose that direction of flow in the alley was a couple of reasons. One, it does. We don't want them coming at each other. That would be confusing. It would lead to congestion. So if we have them come from Irving, come up north, that also is the direction that makes it easier to turn into the spaces, because if you're on the right-hand side of the alley, as it were, you've got a little more room to maneuver into the spaces. And then as you leave, go up to Allen, turn left, you're able to actually utilize the traffic signal at Allen and Victory to turn back onto Victory, which is a better situation than if we went the other way on the alley and had them coming out on Irving.
And I also, do you have a question for that? Because I have another question for Mr. Smith.
I have one.
Hold on. Is it for Mr. Gall?
I think so, yeah.
Let me ask questions for Mr. Gall as long as he's had that.
Yeah.
You had indicated that the drop-off time is actually faster. How do you know it's faster? Where's the data for that?
That's based on our observations at the number of school projects that we've done over the years. It's typically much faster than 10 minutes.
Okay, so it's something you generated. It's
Right.
not something you were handed, so to speak.
Correct. Right.
You happen to know, and it may be outside your analysis, but what's the current vacancy for commercial buildings in that neighborhood? Because obviously vacant buildings would generate less traffic than full buildings, I would think. Is that a safe assumption?
That's a safe assumption, but I don't know
But you
what
don't
the
have
vacancy
to
rate
know.
is.
Just
Right.
was curious. Okay, so that's kind of outside your purview. You just deal with what you see. All right, I think at this point that's all I had. So, Mr. Lee, if you want to ask questions to who was it? Mr. Smith, perhaps?
No, I don't know if this is because I have questions about these numbers here that you provided for drop-off. On your drawing, you have indicated 35 cars, 40 cars, and so on, and kind of base your, I guess, analysis argument based on these numbers here. And I noticed that you have some, walk on or walk to the school kids and also the busing kids. Now, how do you ensure that how do you guarantee these numbers here? And what program or, do you have a sign-up program that makes sure that the parents stick to that program so that you do not have additional load on this, the individual cars dropping kids off?
Okay, I'll start with that, but maybe Kevin can help address the second part. The estimates that we came up with actually are based on information from other Head Start sites, other sites where they do busing right now, and they have around 30% of the students arriving by bus. And at the Riverdale site, the existing Riverdale site, about 38% of the students actually walk. So we use some of that information to help generate these estimates. For the all-day, there wouldn't be any busing element for the all-day students. But we did account for the fact that some of them would walk. For the half-day students, they're the ones that would be bused. We assume some of them would be bused, and the 30%, and then we didn't assume as many of them would walk as for the all-day because of the fact that some would be bused instead. But in terms of how that would be enforced, it's my understanding that each parent will actually sign an agreement regarding how their student is going to arrive to and from the school, whether it be they're using one of the Victory spaces, or using one of the Allen spaces, or I believe busing. But Kevin, you want to speak to that?
Would you like me to
Yes,
extend
yeah.
on that? Okay. The transportation system we have in place is a commitment on the part of the parent. So all the children get trained and the parents get trained, and the sites or the drop-off or pickup locations are identified according to the need in the area. So it's a pretty complex commitment. So somebody's not going to get into that and then go, never mind, I'm going to drive. the walking is based on, we used to actually have to track this data as part of our contract to identify the number of walkers and number of drivers. And so the 38% he's referring to is historical data that we noticed over a 4-year period. So obviously people when they get up in the morning, they have the option to do what they need to do to get their child to preschool. But I think the data is what really speaks to what the reality. If people are going to be driving, and it is ever identified that they will be driven, it will be identified through the family partnership agreement that they have with our family services staff. Parking, like I mentioned earlier, the parking agreements would include things. I can't remember who went to one of our sites, but you had seen the child holding the hands, which was a requirement of the contract. There's lots of details in the agreement. This one will include where they will park and when they will get there, and as far as you've said you're going to ride the bus, you have to ride the bus. You said you're going to walk, you have to walk. There will be flexibility, obviously, but this is the historical data that we've seen.
Do you have a tracking system to make sure that you are kind of sticking by these numbers? Or I guess you cannot force parents to follow exactly to the letters there. But I guess what my concern would be is that you do have some sort of a verifiable ways of doing this, so that you do not have all 65 children end up driving to the school, but
right.
You have a way of tracking this thing and actually make these parents honest to what they're
right.
Signed up to do.
Right. Yes, and we actually have identified already have identified a number of parents who have already signed up to ride the bus when it comes to Glendale. But at any one time, we would be able to provide the data that you're talking about. How many people are riding the bus? How many people are driving?
So you do have that way to
yes,
track
absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
You mentioned that, first, my understanding is that this is only for Glendale residents. Is that true?
That's correct.
And you mentioned most of them are low-income residents.
Right.
Where is the location of where do most of them live? Is there an area where they mostly congregate or live at, or is it spread out throughout most of the city?
We've noticed that our studies have sort of mirrored the annual plans that the city has done in identifying the low to moderate income areas, and so we try to locate our facilities in those areas. So this is one of those zip codes that has been identified as a low to moderate income area. We are also located on Glendale Avenue, right off the 210 freeway, and then on Riverdale Drive, just off of Central, southwest of the Americana, and then on Verdugo, just north of the Los Angeles line. So all of these. I don't have a map with me, but all of these areas are concentrated areas of the low to moderate income families.
So this area has been identified as one of those, and do you have the list of people who are going to be attending?
We do, especially during year one. A number of the attendees will be the families that are currently attending our Riverdale program, and as I stated earlier, we have a number of families already on our waiting list, many of which I'm sure are probably here tonight. So we do have a number. I wouldn't say that we have all 132 families identified, but we definitely, I would say, have well on our way to most of them.
Do you know what proportion of them are from this zip code?
Not right offhand. I don't have that information with me right now, no. But they would definitely all be Glendale residents.
Right. So my next question is, you probably, when you're doing the search for these different sites, you analyzed a whole bunch of different sites. Well, what was special about this one, considering that you have a lot of residents in Riverdale and South Glendale, it sounds like?
Right.
What was special and unique about this site that met your needs?
Several things. First of all, I just want to state that we did start this process in an inclusive manner with the city staff, the planning department, and they helped us to either veer us away from sites that they did not feel would make it through the process as far as where they want to see our program. And this was one of those locations where it is identified we think this would work. As far as specific to our need, important to us is a 0 to 5 location is always our goal, because that means that we can have a family that has an infant or toddler and their 4 or 5-year-old can go to the same school without having to do a drop-off over here and a drop-off over there. And this would provide exactly the number of classrooms, 9 classrooms, that would allow us to do just that. We have 6 for the 3 to 5-year-olds and 3 classrooms for the 0 to 3 infants and toddlers. That's interior. Outdoor, we're always required to maintain, I believe, 75 square feet of outdoor area per child. And so that's why we're here mainly, is because the playground that we're going to install is going to take up a number of the parking spaces that are currently on the site there. So we felt that out of all of the sites that we looked at, this one would be able to provide us with the interior environment, the outdoor environment, and with some variances would be able to provide us with the parking that we needed. I think we started with a dozen different sites. We concentrated on 3 of them, and then mainly because of the 0 to 5 situation I mentioned earlier, this one we were able to do.
You mean the other sites weren't big enough to accommodate the amount of students you want?
Correct. For both the parking, the playground, and the interior. And we did look at a comparable after. I can't remember if it was right before our first presentation to the hearing officer and then this body. We did see one additional building over on Grandview, which would provide us with almost exactly the same type of situation. It was a much larger building, but as far as parking and playground, we sat there and we said, you know what, this is really attractive in a lot of ways, but we're going to be right back in front of the hearing officer and the planning commission once again. So we might as well focus on this building, which meets all of our other needs already.
Yeah, the areas that you're serving, do you recall what zip code numbers those are?
The areas that we survey?
Right.
Which survey are you speaking to?
I mean, the school, serving the neighborhood.
For our community needs assessment? As far as how many...
He means serving. He thought he said survey.
Serving.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, serving area.
Okay. We serve all zip codes in Glendale.
Oh, okay.
As far as Head Start goes, the federal government identifies... they can identify by zip code, by Los Angeles County Office of Education. They're so close to each other, they actually identify by census tract. But we've been granted every zip code in Glendale to serve.
Notice that your support petitions came from a very concentrated area of 201 to 206. That's what I was asking.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, we try, as I mentioned, we try to locate our sites in those high density, low to moderate income areas.
One of the speakers mentioned a petition that had been circulated to local residents. I'm not sure if that had been presented to us.
Didn't make it. Someone's supposed to get a copy.
Yeah, we just got that tonight. So that's our original. Okay. Yeah.
And staff arrives at what time?
They're staggered based on the almost. It'll mirror the drop off and pickup as far as when that drop off and pickup begins. So the staff would typically arrive about 15 minutes before the children would begin to arrive, and they would they would be come and go in 8.5-hour shifts.
And the Head Start program, does that require parental volunteering, a certain number of hours a semester or whatever group?
There's not a requirement, no.
What typically is the volunteers on a daily?
We typically see most of our volunteers actually are during helping out with, basically doing curriculum off-site or going on field trips. Usually the on-site volunteers will be 3 to 4 a day.
And when we're referred to 29 staff, that includes all staff, the janitors, the
Right.
whatever other, besides the instructors or the caregivers.
That's correct.
Any other questions for the appellant at this time? Okay. Before we move into speaker cards, thank you very much. I think we might want to hear from staff, the hearing officer. Was that Ms. Fuentes?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Edith Fuentes, the hearing officer. I'm only here if you have any questions that I may be able to answer or any clarification.
Well, let me
I think Roger Kissel did a good presentation.
Just good?
That's it.
Just good. All right.
Very good.
We expect more from our planning staff than just good, but all right. Questions for Ms. Fuentes? I actually have a couple.
Okay.
Placing any sort of project in an area that's a little bit unusual, for example, school into this commercial zone, you have to be very concerned about the impact to the neighbors. I mean, we're clearly seeing from the fact that it's been appealed and from any number of emails and petitions and so on, there's a tremendous concern and opposition on the part of the neighborhood. And in terms of your process and what you were going through, I mean, clearly you must have had the neighborhood in the back of your mind as you were working through this. And
Correct.
I'd just like to hear a little bit more in terms of a tipping of a scale in terms of how you were able to rationalize that in your process.
Well, I'm going through the analysis that staff made, and I think the case planner and myself, in going through the decision process, again, we're talking about the drop-off requirements, and when I looked at the application, you would see that the facility will be serving 132 children at any given time. And in facilities similar to this, 11 drop-off spaces will be required. So I looked at the fact that there are 6 spaces on-site, and then there are 5 drop-off spaces provided on the Victory Boulevard side and another bus loading zone. So considering the 6 plus the 5 and another bus loading, my thinking was it have met the intent of the drop-off requirements. And again, if the intent of the ordinance is to require 11 drop-off, they have met that particular requirement or intent of the ordinance. And to require additional or more drop-off on-site, which is going to become a hardship or unnecessary hardship for the applicant and the site itself, will be undue hardship as far as the application is concerned. So I looked into that and I said, well, this one is met. As far as the unique requirements, again, the daycare preschool site, the use itself and the development that they're proposing on site, there is no increase in square footage. They're adding a little bit more landscaping. They have a lot of requirements as far as play area per square feet per children. They're also trying to meet several standards and requirements from the state and the city and the county, and I think there are exceptional circumstances as far as the site is concerned, as far as the use and the program is concerned, and the thought process was this equate to exceptional use and circumstance on the project. Again, the hardest item I had to deal with was the detriment to the public or injurious to the property. But considering that what I was looking at was the number of drop-off spaces only, and the parking study submitted, the comments from our traffic and transportation section, I was able to find the third finding, which is that it will not be detrimental to the public or injurious to the property. And again, the item number 4, the granting of the variance will not be contrary to the objectives of the drop-off and pick-up parking requirements only. So I concurred with the case planner's recommendation for approval, and I was able to go through the 4 required findings and approve them.
I actually have more difficulty. I want to hear a little bit more about the unnecessary hardship aspect of things. Unnecessary hardship when the school doesn't exist at this time. The only reason that they face unnecessary hardship is we're placing a school in that particular location. So how do you consider unnecessary hardship when it's the actual creation of the school that now creates the unnecessary hardship? And I don't see how that separates.
Well, to provide 11 or 17 drop-off spaces is really, I don't think they can achieve that, providing that requirement. So what they did is the best that they can, which is to provide some on-site, some on Victory Boulevard, and an additional loading space. And then the traffic and the drop-off and pick-up time, the way they staggered them, that helped also as far as being able to meet some of those requirements.
Okay, and I mean, one of the things that we'll frequently see, whether it's, well, for example, to be specific, something like a Starbucks or other schools, and a lot of these schools have much higher, student counts, is what happens is because it's so congested in front of the school, they migrate onto the side streets. They create all sorts of problems on the side streets, during the drop-off and pickup areas. And, are you absolutely convinced, based on what you saw, that we're not creating a situation where we're pushing traffic onto the side streets as it relates to the fact that you're limiting the drop-off spaces?
The best assessment that I can do or I can get in the proposal is that the staggered hours of drop-off and pickup, the fact that there is only like a few minutes necessary to drop off and pick up a child. It's not like they're parking or they're going to be there for a long period of time. As a matter of fact, I think the traffic engineer mentioned that the average drop-off and pick-up time, and correct me if I'm wrong, is about 12 minutes, whereas with this facility, they're averaging like 9 minutes for drop-off and pick-up. So they're still below the standard or the average. And again, they are, as far as I'm concerned, or as far as the proposal is concerned, they are providing sufficient and convenient short-term parking for children for the drop-off and pick-up. And the fact that there are the maximum allowed is, or the maximum they're proposing is to have 200 children, but at any given time, there will only be 132. So they're not really maximizing the use of the facility. Again, and in here, one of the justification we were able to give is the fact that the facility serves a lower income population, which either they rely on heavy walking or taking the public transit. So the bus transportation or taking the bus, which I think some of the employees will also be doing, will be also alleviating some of the parking requirements.
What do you consider heavy walk-in?
They walk blocks, I would say. Some of them would walk blocks or...
No, but you
Yeah.
said heavy. To me, I'm thinking of a quantity. Because you're saying heavy walk-in.
Like quantity as far as number of...
Yeah, if it, let's just say out of 200 total kids, what do you consider a heavy walk-in proportion?
maybe 50. That's one fourth.
And thank you. That's actually consistent with what they're projecting. So
Right.
I'm seeing a consistency in your analysis, and that's what I was kind of searching for.
Yes.
Anything else you'd like to add?
Like I said, we looked at this closer than because of the fact that I think with any school, traffic and the coming and going are always one of the concerns of the neighborhood, but we also can see how they were trying to provide the best that they can to come as close to compliance as they can with the code requirements.
Any other questions from the Commission at this time? Thank you, Ms. Fuentes.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a number of speaker cards. You'll each be allowed up to 3 minutes. You're entitled to say whatever's germane to this hearing. If you've heard it before, you don't necessarily have to take your full 3 minutes, but you're certainly entitled to it. First card I have is Tom Molick.
Good evening. My name is Tom Molick. I live at 315 Allen. I'm with the appellants, not the applicants, the appellants, and we're here to appeal several variances given to the applicant, which really is a nonprofit private corporation and an operator of state and federally funded programs that we've also found is also a housing corporation with at least 3 existing projects located in Pasadena. Each one of us here that stood before you on the appellant side has put our daily tasks aside in order to better understand the whole issues involving on the variance. We're appealing the reversals based upon the issues that concern us in the neighborhood. We, the neighbors here, see the site every day, and we feel there's mistakes in granting the approvals of the variance which need to be reconsidered. A special and temporary, a variance by definition is a special and temporary privilege which the applicant has 7, 10, 12 special considerations. We appreciate the hearing officer's considerations and findings because all the issues are very complex, interrelated, and were forced basically upon her by multiple variances with confusing outcomes. The multiple variants, we feel, are just a disguise in order to get the certificate of zoning use and permit from the city in order to operate. We also found some new information that the CCLD, the California Community Care Licensing Division of the State Department of Social Services, is on suspension at this present time. If you look at their website, on October 2010, they said that all their licensing programs are on suspension. So this facility is really not licensed. They need to apply to relocate their license to this facility. And right now, and with the state budget cuts, that's a big question mark. So I just wanted to make sure that if there's any documentation you need on that, you can check the website, or I have some information on it that I can pass out. We feel another mistake was made with the minimum number of parking spaces the hearing officer granted. Because of the numerous variances, mitigations, and conditions, this is detrimental. What she says, it's not detrimental, but it really is detrimental to the public safety. In fact, you, the city planning people, went to the city council for an interpretation of daycare drop-offs. City council came back to you August 1st, 2006 in an ordinance ruling. You can check it on your city website. It says that that the drop-offs must be provided within the parking spaces required, which means how many parking spaces are there? There's legitimately 16 legal parking spaces at 312 Ellen plus 6 behind. The handicap drop-offs, the drop-offs should be within those spaces, and they should be considered just like handicap. Parking spaces provided within the parking plan. Is my time up, or yes?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, and we request, based upon those who can't be present here tonight, who also have these safety concerns, we request to reverse the hearing officer's decision on drop-offs and deny any variance from the strict municipal standards. Thank you.
Next speaker is Russ Bartholomew.
My name is Russ Bartholomew. I live at 316 Allen Avenue, which is next door to this proposed improvement. And what I would like to know is why we have zoning regulations if the city doesn't follow them. To shoehorn this school into this property, you now have approved 6 or 7 zoning variations. And it's inconceivable if you do. And I'm told that the traffic's only going to go one way because that's what they have people out there directing the people that are trying to park. The city goes through that alley 2 or 3 times on trash day, going from Irving to Allen, which is backwards from the way they're going to be running these kids. So you have trash trucks going down that same alley at the same time. They come through there about 8 o'clock in the morning. And they go the opposite way. And you can't make it a one-way street that way because the business that's on the other corner, big 18-wheel trucks come in there, and there's no way they can turn off of any other street but Allen to get in that alley. There's just no room on the other street. There's too many cars parked there. It's really a one-way street, Irving is, if you look at it. The only way 2 cars can pass on Irving is if one moves over and lets the other one through. That's all I have to say. It's just a bad idea.
Thank you, sir. Maggie McDonald. Sir, Maggie McDonald. Okay. I have a Vanessa L. I'm sure you'll provide us your last name when you introduce yourself.
Hi, good evening. My name is Vanessa Yosa, and I also reside in Glendale on Irving. I've been a homeowner there for about 10 years with my family, and I'm also a school teacher. So I'm aware of the many school-age programs and child care facilities in the area, and I'm actually here in favor of the program. I know there's many people here opposing it, but I've also spoken to many families in the area that are for the program. Like they stated, many families are underserved in the area, and as a school-age teacher, I know that many programs have closed. There's one program called New Horizon, which about 2 weeks ago has closed their doors to about 200 families in the Glendale community, and so many families of low income are in need of such services. And in addition to that, there are schools in the area, but they do not provide services for infants. And this center does provide services for infants. So I actually feel, as a resident that will also be living right down the street from this project, it will benefit the families and children that are in need of this program and that do not have the resources to go outside of Glendale, especially due to low income and such, economic, financial difficulties. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Very much. Yes, question for the speaker.
Do you have kids now who
I'm
planning to?
I'm currently pregnant, and I mean, yes, I would be in walking distance if this program starts running. So it will benefit not just me. I have a sister-in-law that's pregnant. I have family members, neighbors in the area. But as a school teacher, I also know how important it is that many of our families that are in my school also are in need of services. So they have nowhere to go to, especially with the budget cuts. Many programs are being cut, and this program is flourishing and providing such services.
Teaching Glendale?
Yes.
School?
For Glendale Unified School District, we do after-school programs and things like that. Mm-hmm.
And you said you live a block away?
Mm-hmm. On Irving, so I will still be, in the same area as other neighbors are.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We're getting another couple cards trickling in. That's okay. But if this becomes a landslide, we're going to start severely limiting additional speakers' time, okay? So if you want to speak, you've got literally about 3 minutes in which to turn in a card. Next speaker card is Paul Petraeus.
Good evening. My name is Paul Petraeus. I'm a property owner at 1750 to 1752 Victory and 1754, 1756, as well as apartments on 328 Allen Street. We've been there since the 50s, my family. I grew up the area. I know the area well there and stuff. And I tell you, parking has always been a problem on Allen Avenue. The apartments that are on Allen, when they were built, everybody had maybe one car, so now everybody has two cars, so all the units, half of them are parking on the street. It's always been a problem. On Victory, when RTD came and painted all the streets red, in the 70s, that took away parking there, so my tenants at the Victory properties, they have their employees park on Victory, and clients park at the back, so they keep that open. On Allen Avenue on trash day, half the parking is taken up. And 2 days a week there's, street sweeping on one side and street sweeping on the other day. So that's 3 days of the week where half the parking is gone on that street for the tenants to park because of city services. What else was I going to say here? For them to put this up here on the corner there on Victory, Victory is a really busy street. I don't know if they're talking about doing a pickup and takeoff on Victory, but the first kid that gets hit getting out of a car or running into the street, because there's 2 lanes going each way, and 35, I think, is the speed limit. People speed there all the time. It's one of Glendale's places where they're always writing tickets because they just speed there. They're going to be pointing fingers at somebody. Why are we having a school on such a busy street? I don't think that's a good idea. Also, too, there's right now, I don't know when they did their traffic thing, but there's 5 vacant buildings within 100 yards of where they want this school to be. Once they fill up again, businesses start going and get better. the parking is just going to get worse and worse. I mean, like I say, Allen is already a nightmare as it is. It's going to make parking even worse there. They're going to be going in and out of the alley. That's going to be a problem. And then on top of that, if they ever open up the railroad tracks again on Allen Avenue up the street, traffic going up and down Allen is going to be really busy. I mean, it was before. They closed it down, the neighborhood got nice, but they open that again too. I just don't think this is a good area to have a school with a residential and the other commercial right around that area and a busy street. So that's what I had to say on that, and thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Final speaker card is Alondra Hernandez.
Hi, my name is Alondra Hernandez. I live in Glendale, in 520 Elk Avenue. I went to Head Start for 2001 and 2000. I want to say that I think it's a good idea to have the school, even though, like, the gentleman said that they already have a parking sheet where they can park. And I think it's a good idea because if you guys move the school, the parents are going to have to find somewhere else to put their child, and if there isn't enough space, they wouldn't finish preschool. So that's what I think. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, no further speaker cards. We will allow the appellant rebuttal time, again, up to 15 minutes. If there's anything you want to say in terms of rebuttal to anything that the applicant or any of the speakers said. We won't count travel time to the mic against you.
Okay, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is someone passed this out to us, and I think it shows the traffic flow, like on Victory. And, I mean, to me, this is an example of still going to be the merry-go-round effect. People come down Victory, they're going to be cycled through Irving Avenue, which, as a gentleman said, is, even though it's 2 lanes, there's so much parking on both sides of that street. As a matter of fact, when I go to work in the morning, I go through that alley and I go on Irving every morning. If another car is coming the opposite direction, you better hope that there is a space where you can park in, because otherwise 2 cars are not getting down that street in the opposite direction at the same time. So they're going to be coming down Victory onto Irving, in the back of in the alleyway, in the public alleyway, next to where the employees are supposed to be parking in a tandem arrangement. Then when they come out of the alley, since there are only 6 spaces, and if those are filled up, then parents are going to have to go around the building. Well, I mean, where else are they going to park if there are like 20, even 10 parents that show up at one time and there are only 6 spaces? They're going to have to go through the alley onto Allen Avenue, take a left, which is actually to the stoplight, which is actually going to be across opposing traffic on Allen Avenue. They're going to be turning left, and there will be people coming down the street this way from Allen, and to make a turn, I mean, that's dangerous right in itself right there, especially if you have a concentrated period of time. And again, they're going to have to cycle on to Victory, and at this point, they can't park in the front of the building. They have to go back around and cross traffic to get back onto Irving and make the merry-go-round cycle. So, to me, I actually think this is a good example of the merry-go-round cycle. Okay, they talked about only 16 legal parking spaces, or the parking lot for employees. There are only 16 legal spaces in that parking lot, 32 in tandem. They're supposed to have assigned parking. It was also mentioned about volunteers. And I saw that in some of the Head Start information on their website that they say that they encourage parent involvement. Well, most people that I know that have little children in school, the parents are really encouraged to, as much as they can, try to be in the classroom and to help out the teachers. So if there are going to be various volunteers or parent involvement, where are those people going to be parking? They're going to be parking on our local streets. I know they talked about something about 40 cars in the morning and within 45 minutes with 10 minutes available per car. Can everyone really get their child in and out of their vehicle in 10 minutes? I mean, what if your child is ill and you need to talk to someone inside the daycare center, or there's some kind of issue with your child? Is every parent really going to be able to stay within that 10-minute max, a 10-minute period of time? And if not, then what are they going to be doing, and where are they going to be parking? Either on our local streets, or else they're going to be circling around the neighborhood. Also, oftentimes if parents are coming from different parts of town and they have a 10-minute wait in a time-limited area, not all parents are going to get there exactly 10 minutes ahead of time. If they get there earlier, then they're going to have to either circle onto our streets or park someplace else in our local parking on our streets, and we already have limited parking both on Allen Avenue and on Allen Avenue. And I wondered, has anybody done a speed study on Victory Boulevard or a circulation study at all to really assess the speeders that go down not only Victory but Allen Avenue? I know one of our local neighbors in EVS, one of the businesses who was at a previous meeting and spoke, said that he sits and watches the Glendale police stop speeders on Victory Boulevard on a weekly basis several times a week because of the speeding traffic. It was mentioned that there will be accommodations for some busing, and nothing has been said about where those buses will park. I mean, will they be parking somewhere on site for the facility? Will they be parking someplace else? Or will they be taking up additional parking? One of the school representatives mentioned that the staffing is staggered to about 15 minutes before the pickup and drop-offs, and they have 6 different pickup drop-off times. How is the assigned parking going to work for tandem parking, which means that people have to park in front of and in back of one another, and once the lot starts to get, parked up, how does somebody who then maybe comes in at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock and has to leave at 3 o'clock, how do they arrange that parking and being able to get out of those spaces in a way that doesn't impact some of the parent drop-off and pickup and congesting the alley when they're trying to juggle around in the tandem parking, trying to get out of their parking spaces? And that's all that I have to say in rebuttal. Thank you.
Mr. Schlaich, were you adding anything to that? You do, as long as, again, focus on rebuttal as opposed to rehashing your initial remarks, if you would, sir. Are you taking that time? I can't tell if you're moving.
I haven't got any comments.
All right, you're not mic'd. I'll just note for the record that you've declined, that you have nothing further to add. Thank you, sir. All right, the applicant has rebuttal period. Mr. Smith, however and whatever you feel the need to address.
Okay, I'll address 2 issues. The issue of busing was mentioned. We actually have 3 buses that we utilize to serve our entire area. Currently, they're all serving the Pasadena and Altadena area. Once we bring that bus to Glendale on a daily basis, what will happen is kids will be picked up at the designated areas around the area. They will be brought. The bus, we have a designated area in front of the site. Children will literally get off of the bus, walk directly into the site. There's a sidewalk is one of the conditions that has been required. And the child will walk directly in. There's bus monitors, bus driver there to assist in the process. And so after they are in the classrooms, signed in, the bus leaves. It does not park on site. Okay. And that will happen again for the afternoon program. And likewise, the pickup operation will operate accordingly. Also, the staff time that was mentioned, we only have a 30-minute lunch for our staff. So what happens is staff arrive, and they're there. I would venture to say 90 to 95% of them are there. They actually eat lunch with the children at the table in the classrooms. So very, very, very minimal number of staff are actually leaving during that middle portion. So it's only at the beginning and the end of the day that the staff are coming and leaving. And so I will yield to any of the other two gentlemen that would like to add.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I wanted to add a little bit to that, and just to finish with that thought about the staff arrivals and departures. That would be without, outside of the time periods for the drop-off and the pickup, so that there would be very minimal interference between the staff going in and out of their parking lot and the drop-off and pickup moves. And there was also a concern or a point raised about how would the tandem operate. There are actually a number of different ways tandem spaces can operate, but in an employee situation, it's quite common, and it does work. And it can either be informally that if somebody needs to move, who's the one that's parked in, then two of them go out together and move the one car and the other one leaves. Or it can be a more formal procedure where somebody is actually responsible for the keys for the person that's parked on the outside and can access those. And I'm not sure, Kevin, which way you would go, but both of those are common techniques that are used in employment situations. The concern that was expressed again about the merry-go-round effect and the possibility of people maybe moving around, not finding the space when they come in on Irving, come in from Irving to the alley, and then having to go around again. Again, we feel that there is sufficient capacity given here to allow these moves to happen, or the drop-offs and pickups to happen without that occurring. When we talk about 35 cars arriving in a 30-minute period, and those cars are split between the Victory and the alley side, when you stop to think about it, you're really talking about, on average, a car every 2 minutes entering the alley. So it's not an intense arrival period. There will be certainly times, that's the average, there will be certainly times when there's more than that, but there are other times during the 30-minute period when there's less. But it's a demand level that we feel can be accommodated without the need to actually go around the block again. There was a question about parent parking, I believe that was raised. If there are volunteers that are working there throughout the day, the volunteers can actually be parked in the tandem lot with the employees. The employees would take up 29 spaces. There are 3 more spaces available. Other visitors during the day would be able to park in the 6 spaces behind the school when it's not during the pickup and drop-off periods. And I think those are the points I wanted to address. So, anything else from you, Kevin? Or
Yes, I'd like to address 2 issues. I want to notice that is an existing parking lot. It's existed for the last 20 years and served an architectural firm with 90 employees. At the time that we used it, we had a buddy system, and to the best of my knowledge, there has never been an incident reported to either the fire department or to the police department regarding any incidents with regards to the use of tandem parking on that site. In addition, there is a bus loading and unloading area designated at the corner of Victory and Irving, and it's the first parking space north of Irving Avenue. Thank you.
Just a couple more statements. Regarding the licensing procedure that was brought up, we're not eligible to apply for a license until we have site control and until we have the renovations in place and until literally the furniture is in the classroom. So that is a process. I just want to make sure everybody was clear that the licensing process is not something we could already have in our hand for this site. And also the parent involvement piece that was brought up. Yes, parent involvement is heavily pushed in Head Start, but it's not that they're asking parents to take off from work or wherever they're going and come into the classroom. They're being asked to participate in the education of their child, which, for their regard, they're an extended teacher at home as opposed to being in the classroom. So just wanted to address those two items. Thank you.
I think we have some questions, Mr. Lee?
Yes, I do.
To who?
To Mr. Smith. You mentioned that you have 3 buses. Are these buses private, van-type buses, or does it have actually school bus marking with the stop sign and the flashlights?
Correct. They're official school buses with all the bells and whistles.
Okay. And this question might be also towards the staff as well. And that is that because one of the comments that was made was the trash pickup time was conflicting with the pickup and drop-off time of the kids. Is the waste management schedule, is that flexible? Is that rigid? Are they have their own mind, or what? Is it something that could be worked out? This is a question. And one of the also other concerns that the resident had was that the Victory Boulevard is a very fast-paced speed lane, 35 miles an hour. Normally, when you pass through the school zone, your speed limit is down to 25. Is that something that could be applied here, or is that Victory Boulevard is such a major thoroughfare that you cannot do that?
Both of those issues that you've raised are things which are governed by the Public Works Department. We can investigate them. But I don't think that we are in a position to condition them.
Let me go ahead, please.
And just add, I was just going to add, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, that with respect to speed limits, there's a procedure within the vehicle code that you have to follow, and I forget the exact rule, but you can't change the speed limit unless, Chiefs might know this, unless the average is a certain 85% of the average. You can't change it below that. So it wouldn't be just solely the city's discretion. You'd have to do a study and do all that. It couldn't be something that the Works Director could just.
Let me restate the question a little bit. Rather than putting the burden on the city to solve the problem, how are you going to address neighboring businesses with their deliveries and trash trucks or any other type of vehicles that have the free use of that alley? How are you going to handle conflicting traffic flow?
Well, we will have a discussion with each of those to see, as Mr. Lee mentioned, is there any flexibility? And we have similar situations at other sites. It'll be a partnership. It'll be a specific arrangement that we'll have to make. I can't speak to the influx of Mr. Horowitz. Could probably expand on the actual frequency of deliveries and so on. But we would be involved with each of the businesses and cities who would be affecting the flow of traffic. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, it's great to throw out words like partnership and things like that, but the fact of the matter is it's a potential conflict, and there is no plan other than, gosh, we hope we'll work it out. I mean, there's got to be a process. Either your traffic engineers faced this in the past, and this is how it gets dealt with. I mean, is there a plan to address this or not? And it sounds like not yet.
Currently, not yet. No.
Have other questions? Other questions right now?
I'm good.
All right. Was there further rebuttal? I think you had wrapped up. As long as it's a rebuttal.
I just want to support what Kevin said. For instance, Riverdale, trash pickup is at 6:30. So we do negotiate, we find out what the issues are, and then we just negotiate. And all I can say is we can speak from our history. We've been able to resolve every issue that we've come up against. And sometimes, we even break down classrooms on a daily level in some sites. So so
Sorry, you do what? On
we
daily
even,
level?
like in some sites where we have our classrooms, and because they do other things at different hours, we break up the classrooms so that they can do different things. So what I'm saying is we're used to accommodating whatever difficult situation that we might encounter. So we can do that.
Would you also please state your name for the record?
Oh, sorry, my name is Wasita Swad. I'm the Head Start administrator.
Thank you for keeping us in line there. Again, further questions? And thank you very much. That was germane.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. We're going to take a very brief break, and then we'll continue with the hearing. So we're going to be in recess for just 2 or 3 minutes, all right? Thank you. Yeah. Okay, it looks like we're back in session. We're continuing with the February 2nd regular meeting of the Glendale Planning Commission. And I actually, in the course of our brief recess, had another question for the applicant. And I think I'll go with Mr. Smith, and if there's someone else involved, please let me know. One of the things that have been brought up is that you had worked with staff, and I believe you said staff, you might have said the city, correct me anyways, in terms of locations throughout the area that would be appropriate for a daycare center. Who on staff were you working with? Was this planning or who?
Primarily planning, yes. You want names?
Well,
is that what you're asking? Or
it would be helpful if you happen to know.
Sure. Well, we've originally we met with Howard Malice from the planning department, Jacqueline Bartlett, Mr. Kiesel, Tom Mitchell. I believe there was from planning. I believe there may have been at least one other person. I can't recall his name, but I believe he was from Traffic. We've had a long development with community development community development department, primarily with Moises Carrillo has been through some of the community development block grant programs. So as far as official discussions regarding this particular site and our search, it was the first set of individuals that I mentioned.
And how many sites do you think you looked at? You mentioned one other potential site.
We originally had proposed, I believe, around a dozen different sites, and through the original discussions, and chiseled it down to, I believe, 4 that the planning department recommended as being meeting use and zoning requirements.
All right, that was the question. Thank you very much. Have there been any other questions that have popped up for the applicant at this time? All right. Closing. Let's see. We've had the rebuttals. Closing remarks from staff.
I don't necessarily have any, aside from just some clarification on what Mr. Smith just said. I got involved after they decided on this site. I wasn't involved in anything before that. I know they spoke of other sites, but I don't know what those were, and I wasn't involved in that discussion. So may have been other departments. I know Jackie Bartlow is actually now a part of our department in another division, but she's in development services. I know she and Howard Malis, I believe, spoke with them before my involvement. I don't know I don't know who provided the guidance to narrow down the sites, though.
Okay. Boy?
I just provide a little background on the regulation that is under question here about drop-off spaces. The way this provision has been in the code for about 5 years, and drop-off spaces, according to the code, are supposed to come from your total number of required parking spaces. And in this case, half of the drop-off spaces being provided are on Victory Boulevard, plus the bus drop-off space. Half the drop-off spaces, only half the drop-off spaces being provided are from the parking that is required based on the square footage percentage. So, in some sense, that probably takes a little bit of pressure off the employee parking that some of the otherwise required spaces would not have to be marked as drop. That makes sense.
Anything? Unless there's anything else from my fellow commissioners, we'll close the public hearing. We'll go into deliberations. And as always, we're free to reopen if we have any questions that pop up. So the public hearing's closed. We'll start with deliberations. Initial thoughts or comments? Mr. Lee?
This is very difficult case in that we have have need for this the services for our community, and in light of other New Horizon programs and other programs closing down due to state budget and all that. But then we also are looking at the effect that this will have in the surrounding area. But where, I guess, wherever you're proposing this facility, I think you're running into these problems anyways. With the schools, I mean, it comes with a package. So I'm looking at this, are we looking at 200 or are we looking at 132? And, by the explanation given and analysis that was done, I believe that 132 is a reasonable assumption that we can go with. That's requiring 11 drop-off spaces and 5 mitigated drop-off zone. To me, is acceptable. And the applicant, I guess in this case, the school, I think has done their part to really reach out to the community, and also, you cannot be 100% all the time, but they've done quite a bit of I guess studies and also the measures that are required to lessen the impact that this will have in the surrounding neighborhood. I believe that some of the checks and balances or verification method that I was asking for, I think they were satisfactory in that this school has performed well in the past in other sites, and I believe that they will continue to do so. And I believe that this facility is going to be actually outweigh the negative and will be the positive addition to the area that needs this Head Start program. So I'm in favor of sustaining the decision that was made by ZA.
Thank you very much.
This is, like Commissioner Lee also said, very tough. Wherever you put a school in, I think you're always going to find problems. Some places maybe more than others. We had a similar case a couple weeks ago, and there was just as strong emotions on both sides and opinions on the impacts of living near a school. This is different than that case for a number of reasons, one of which is that this is primarily for Glendale residents. It's a need that the city needs. I mean, so the city has to find, or we're trying to accommodate in some way this service in the city, and attempting it to do it in a place that's closest to those residents who need it most. Seems as though a reasonable attempt has been made to find that location. And considering that the mitigation measures that have been in place for this, I think the attempts been made to accommodate within that site as much as possible. They need a playground for this type of use. They're not going to be able to comply exactly with the code, or else, they can't have a playground. They can't have several things that a facility like this requires in order to operate. And I think you will find that challenge anywhere in the city. So I think for those reasons, I would be in favor of not denying the variance request and supporting it. And I'm also, the reason why I think it's reasonable to think that traffic would not be as bad, although I'm sure it's going to be there will be problems, is the time throughout the day that have been spaced out. And I think based on our understanding of the calculations that's been used, and my own experience from looking at past projects with other schools, this seems like a reasonable amount of traffic for this particular area. So I would be in favor of this as well.
All right, thank you. Beats?
Leaves one. Well, as usual, as stated by the other commissioners, this is always difficult. And sometimes I have trouble dealing with the fact that the decisions we make are with rules and regulations and zoning code that have really nothing to do with the validity and the value of what the school or whatever it is offers. So my thoughts are based on those points. We recently, as was stated by another commissioner, we recently had a case with Chamelon School up in La Crescenta, and there was some real emotional context and information given to us by both sides, the school and by the local residents in the neighborhood. And as has been stated, every school in this city and probably every city has significant parking problems. And I know firsthand, having dealt with cases here on the commission, but also having raised both of our children in the city and being on school site council and such, parking problems are tremendous at every school, some worse than others, but they're very significant. The problem I see is every time we have a discussion and deliberate about what should be done and what could be done, it always comes down to the fact that everybody has a good plan, the school has good intentions, we have traffic engineer input. Guess what? The people that drive the cars don't know that, don't understand that. If they do, they choose not to observe it. This whole issue of following the traffic following a certain pattern is not at a school is not an orderly process. It's not an exact science. And I'm always interested when I see traffic flow patterns and plans. I've seen, this is a pretty basic one, but I've seen some that are electronic, and they have all these little squares traveling in a certain direction. They go the same distance. They all do the same thing. Kind of like if you're looking at dots and dashes on a digital system, they do what they're supposed to do. They go in a direction. But I've been appalled at times at what these actual cars really do when they're in the traffic, even though they carry the most valuable asset to a family, the children. They will do unbelievable things in trying to hurry through the process. Some of the things that bother me about the traffic plan, I personally believe that this is just the wrong way. I would do it the opposite way. That's my perception, but I had training that told me you do everything you can to not make a left-hand turn. In this case, we're making a left-hand turn on Allen Avenue to go to Victory, which is unsafe. And that distance between that alley and Victory is not very long. So we're going to be stacking up people coming out of the alley waiting for traffic going up and down Allen, and traffic that's coming from Victory up Allen. Same thing on Irving Avenue. We're going to be on the right-hand side of the street having to cross traffic to go down the alley. And it just never fails to happen. It always happens that the car that is at the staging area, their child is not at that point to be picked up. So what you do is the person is forced to either go around the block or go around the street, or in some cases they just wait. I find in the Glendale schools what they'll do is they'll lock the door, let the car idle, and wait till their child comes. And I know that's an extreme case, but nothing would amaze me is what people do when they're trying to get their kids dropped off and go on to their job or wherever they have to go. So a couple last items. When I went out to this site on numerous occasions, one of the occasions there was trash trucks on Irving that blocked all the traffic in the alley and stacked traffic going up towards Lake Street and down towards Victory, and made it impossible to even move, because when they're, as was stated previously, when there are cars on both sides of Irving, you can only put one car down that street. I am completely opposed to dropping any child off on Victory Avenue. It just doesn't work for me. If the person gets out of the car to get the kid out of the car, if the kid jumps out of the car, that's two-way traffic, two lanes going both ways. And they do go fast, and in the morning and the afternoon they're coming and going from work. And now my last point will be, having seen what happened in the last school that we dealt with, and the issues in the neighborhood not being dealt with over a long period of time, having dealt with numerous schools in the city, from helping the administration to being a parent, I can't make what happens in school districts go away. The problem, I can't change the problems. We tried to change them on numerous occasions. But what I would say is, do I want to bring this problem to a neighborhood now? And I personally have some concerns there.
All right. Well, you've heard us 3 times. You'll hear a 4th in terms of difficult decisions and difficult things to deal with. We've referred to a recent case, and not that it applies, but there are examples that we can take from it. And I believe one of my previous commissioners has already pointed out that it's, and I'll draw on that, it's one thing if you have a school or a daycare or any sort of facility in your neighborhood, and you move into that neighborhood and you know what you're buying into. You understand that there's a school in the neighborhood. You understand, if it's a commercial district, you know what you're buying into when you buy your home. It's a much more serious and a much more challenging thing to drop a new use into an existing neighborhood for the risk of what it means to that neighborhood. And that's obviously what we're talking about tonight. In the previous case, and we can see it again and again, is no matter the plans that a well-intentioned property owner or tenant put forward are only as good as the customers or the parents that need to follow them. And in other examples, we've seen a lot of situations where that hasn't been the case. And as a result of it, the impact to that school spreads out into the neighborhood. In other locations, a lot of that also revolves around a much higher density or a much higher student count. We're talking with 500 students, or, for God's sakes, high schools where you're in the thousands. So offsetting my concerns to that is the fact that we're talking a much more controlled number of students. On the other hand, it's still a significant number. It's 132 in the morning, it's 132 at lunchtime, it's 132 in the evening, 132 in, 68 in, 68 out, 132 out, and so on. There is an extremely, I hate to throw the word crisis around, but there's a serious need in this city. The loss of New Horizons with its child care program, the continuing conditions that we're facing both demographically and economically, there's problems. There's an absolute need for Head Start and similar daycare programs in the city. And that needs to be supported and that needs to be encouraged. By the same token, should it be dropped into this neighborhood, and are the things that we're looking at going to seriously impact the ability of the neighboring property owners to continue to enjoy what they've come to expect? It's difficult, but I am, and the other problem we have is once we make the decision, we don't have an opportunity 2 years from now to say, oh, it's not working, you need to leave the school. I mean, this is a permanent and it's a long-term decision. And throughout the hearing, I've literally gone back and forth on it. And I'm sitting here right now, and I'm still very much on the fence. I'm having difficulty making the decision, and I need to reflect on it a little bit. And I'm just going to ask my commissioners if there's further comments they want to make, other observations.
Do you see an opportunity do you think if we didn't do it now, there may be another opportunity to have a site like this? I mean, to create service to meet the need.
Well, yeah, clearly that's part of the dilemma is if not here, where?
Right.
And if there are other locations, are they better or are they worse? I mean, are we saying no, not here, and we're going to put it into even a worse location and impact more people? Absolutely.
I mean, my thought was that, like you, I was going back and forth, but, they did, they did not just, choose this site from the beginning and just went ahead with it, but they worked with the staff to look at 10 potential sites throughout the city, narrowed it down to 4, and finally to this site. And, I think we all understand that that any school will come with this baggage. But then again, as you mentioned, we have the need for this service. And, most of the sites that the staff reviewed, that they looked at, will also, require variances and will, require the same process here. So that's why I kind of mentioned that, what is it that, there are definitely, there's a negatives and positives, but, what weighs what, outweighs what. And by, like I said, the reasoning behind this is that I was now looking at 200 load, but I was actually looking at 132 load, which, Commissioner Schiss did not agree with the Victory, drop-off site. But, as it is right now, with the applicant addressing most of the problems, it may not be perfect, but they are, they do have in place those procedures, the policies, and they have addressed a lot of the concerns that we were asking. So, and that was one of my thought process, of going that direction. Yeah.
Mr. Sheets.
What sticks in my mind and what is a flag to me is when we have projects that have so many variances. I know that goes back to the issue of what sites are available and what sites aren't available and what can be done to mitigate them. But if I lean one way or the other, I would lean to not give so many variances. I just think it starts to dilute the importance and the clarity of what zoning restrictions and rules we have today. And then, in this case, it comes down to the issue of parking and traffic, which is one of the biggest issues that we have in this city right now. And if there's anybody in this room that doesn't think we have an issue with that and hasn't heard some of the results and some of the problems we've had with children being killed, people being hit, we need to work on what we can do to make sure those things don't happen. And it is my feeling that if we stick a problem with traffic and parking into a neighborhood that's right on a busy business street or a large thoroughfare, I think we're adding to that problem. So my main concern, having no reflection on the need for this type of service, on the ability and quality of this program, just basically on the rules, I still feel that we have a choice right now as to whether to put it here and create a problem or not.
I appreciate the additional remarks. It's allowed me to reflect a little bit more. And where I'm going to come down is when I have trepidation and I don't have a chance to be able to reverse a decision with some sort of threshold, and it's a forever decision, I'm going to come down on the side of status quo, and I would actually come in favor of overruling the planning hearing officer and denying the variance. That said, we can continue deliberations. In fact, it sounds like we're at 2-2. We should do motions. We should go through the process. Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Chairman, if you remember from the last case that we had 2 weeks ago, when that was 2-2, the Commission was acting as the hearing body itself, not the appeal body. And when you're acting as the appeal body, there's a specific provision in the code which requires that any motion, whether to affirm or reverse or modify the decision, requires the affirmative vote of three votes of the Commission. And since we have a full Commission, I think in our view what that requires is that requires the full Commission to hear it. So my suggestion is you can either take the motions and they could end up 2-2, and we'd be continuing it anyway to ask Commissioner Landrigan to review the tape and then participate in the decision, or you can just continue it to subsequent meeting and then seek Ms. Landrigan's participation in.
Thank you, because I was going to ask you whether 2-2 was de facto sustaining. In this case,
right.
We get to 3.
Right.
All right. Well, that said, with my fellow commissioners' permission, I won't even call for a motion, because I do think we're at 2-2, and I think it would continue. I would ask for a motion to continue for Ms. Landrigan's participation, so that we can get to 3 one way or another.
So just to clarify, would we redo the hearing?
No. In fact, my suggestion is that the hearing stays closed. We're just continuing the matter to a date certain.
So she can observe?
She'd have to review the tape and review the record and then make a decision based on that.
What if she has her own questions and things like that?
Can reopen the public hearing for her questions, can we?
That's correct. Just as, it can't be a representation of the evidence, and it can't be new. Obviously, it can't be new evidence.
If there's additional public comment cards, are those allowed or not?
They shouldn't be allowed, no, in our view.
Just so we know the ground rules.
Right.
So unless there's opposition, I'm thinking we should probably continue.
Should go.
All right. So can we have a motion to continue the matter to, do we have room for the next date?
Your next meeting is on February 16th. You will have 3 items on that agenda already, 1 appeal, and you have an arts and entertainment district zone change, and also a use variance. So you do have a full agenda for the 16th.
Well, I think since we've had the hearing and we'll be in more of a deliberation vote process, I'd like to crowd it into that agenda just so that the parties that are involved know what's going on. Is that fair with everyone as well?
That's motion to continue. The date certain February 16th, without any further public notice.
Second.
I have motion support. Call roll, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. PVAR, on a vote of 4-0, PVAR 2010-008 is continued to February 16th without further notification. All right. Take a moment and let the din die down before we move on to the next item. Staff, do you need to set up anything for? In terms of the zoning code amendments, is there anything set up?
Just we all need to just get up here.
They don't get any easier, do they, guys?
If there's any thing, no.
Oh, we're still in session, by the way.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to introduce the next item. Is staff ready for the next item? I'll introduce it and we'll give staff a few minutes. All right, the next item is zoning code amendment case P. Could the audience help us a little bit by holding it down? Please, we're trying to conduct business. Thank you. The next item is zoning case amendment PZON 2010-005 and general plan amendment case PGP 2011-001. It's citywide, it's city initiated, and it is amendments to Title 30 of the Glendale Municipal Code 1995 and the Downtown Specific Plan relating to miscellaneous revisions and minor cleanups. Let me preface this before we turn it over to staff by saying there's a whole bunch of things here. Some are minor, some are more complex. I think what we'll do is we'll let staff present, and if there are things we can move forward on, great. If there's things we need to continue a little bit, we shall. So we have a recommendation that the Community Development Department staff recommends that we review the proposed amendments to the Municipal Code and the Downtown Specific Plan and the minor cleanups and provide a recommendation to City Council. Staff, please proceed.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Kane and fellow commissioners. My name is Milka Toledo. I am one of the planners in the Planning Division. This part is a series of code amendments before you. Some of the types of changes in this ordinance include correction of errors, clarification of existing regulations, codifying interpretations, amendments to reflect changes in other laws, for example, local Glendale Municipal Code or state laws, changes to reflect organizational or title changes, and changes that either the public or the staff have brought up recently. And again, that is before you today in the packet. These changes are mainly improvements in processes, design, situations that have, again, arisen. And input was received by several meetings that staff had with both an internal group, which again would be the technical advisory group, representation from planning, traffic and transportation, building and safety, neighborhood services, redevelopment and engineering were part of that group. And in addition, we had, of course, the zoning code advisory group that consisted of HOA members, commercial property owners, present and former members of the Planning Commission, architects and planners that, again, met on several occasions, actually 4 times to be specific, and we reviewed the proposed changes together in that meeting. These comments were taken into consideration when drafting the staff report and ordinance before you this evening. In order to facilitate and have a more smoother process as we go along in this extensive document, we recommend that addressing what staff believes are the more minor changes first and discuss the more complex issues later. Staff present this evening will be available to address these issues and answer any questions that you may have. We have Tim Foy, our Assistant Director of Planning, Wolfgang Kraus, one of our Principal Planners, Stephanie Reich, Senior Urban Designer, Kristen Asp, Senior Planner, Chris Deacon Planner, and Sam Engel, our Neighborhood Services Administrator. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to Wolfgang Kraus, our Principal Planner.
Thank you, Ms. Toledo. I'd like to begin talking about the more minor issues. The staff report starts on page 10. First of all, a little correction. At the bottom of page 10, section 3012-020, regarding language related to uses in the zoning districts, please cross that off, as staff decided fairly late in the process not to include that in the draft.
Restate that, Mr.
The last item on page 10 relates to section 30.12.020 related to language for different uses in the various zoning districts. Please just delete that. It's not included in the draft. And
I was turning to it, and I hadn't reached it by the time you told us. So thank you. I'm with you.
So
thank you.
We decided not to include that language in the draft. So page 10 starts with all the more minor things. One or two of them might be addressed later as part of the more complex issues. But for the most part, the staff report is, at least we think it's self-explanatory, although some of the explanations are a bit brief. So as opposed to me going through each and every one of them, or different staff members going through each and every one of them, let me just first ask if there are any questions related to any of those items, or if you'd like a further explanation in the interests of time. Again, as I said, some of them are fairly self-explanatory. As Milka mentioned earlier, some of them are done with regard to title changes. We've changed the organization, different department names, different titles of staff members, so that's part of the corrections.
So
different references, different references to code sections, and a few corrections.
So you're referring to the changes or the comments that you're seeking for is anything after page 10?
After page 10, if you'd like me to, or any one of the staff to provide further explanation.
Up to page 17 or just page 10?
No, anything beyond page 10.
Okay.
Anything beyond page 10.
So then I do have a couple of questions.
Okay. Please. And again, we have several different staff members.
Yeah, it is on, yes.
We have several different staff members, so we may all jump in here.
Right. Page 12, 30.61.010. Variances, conditional use permits, design review, request for parking reduction, and development plan review for special recreation.
Right.
The special recreation zoning comes before us for review, and yes, we did have minor, small projects come before us, that we had to look at everything. And you're recommending that that those small projects are reviewed at the director level or planning staff level. And my question is that what is the guideline, or what constitutes, the small project, the definition of a small project? So I think there should be something that addresses what that could be, so that we're clear as to we're not living up to just vague interpretation, but there's a little bit more defined guideline there.
And we could do something related to square footage of buildings, but short of that, because the SR zone involves many varieties of uses, from stadiums, golf courses, camps, that short of listing every one of them, we wanted to give a little bit of flexibility to the director, as long as the basic site plan wasn't being modified, and that these were minor grading, minor retaining walls, small accessory buildings. And we don't get too many of those, but we figured that it was maybe overkill having Planning Commission review some of these small things, like a restroom building for a golf course, or a retaining wall for, let's say, Camp Max Strauss, something like that. But if you'd like, again, you can deliberate on that later. If you'd like us to be a little bit more specific, we can work on that. Do you have any suggestions at all?
Just a suggestion, comment. Page 15, on the 30.44.020, applicability of administrative exceptions, allowing maximum deviation of 10% to numeric standards of the zoning code.
Yes.
And you list various standards for area, height, density, dwelling, and all that. My question is that 10% a cumulative number in the one project, or is that 10% applies to each standard variation so that you could have multiples of a 10% deviations in one project?
Yes, it's B. It applies to each standard. So you could apply for a 10% deviation from any standard except, as we indicated, floor area ratio or number of parking spaces.
So
that's correct.
So you could have in one project 5, 6.
Right. They could apply, yes.
So do they have to then apply the administrative exception for each one of them, or just
It'd be one application as long as they did it at the same time. They would just list all of the items.
I see.
That's possible today. At one time, when we first created the administrative exception process, you could only apply for one deviation. After that, you'd have to apply for a variance. But that was changed a few years ago. So we're not changing the process, just the type of another category that could be applied. And there'll be a little bit more discussion about that issue later, but I hope that answers your question.
Mr.
Just
Sheets?
a quick question back on page 12, the issue around special recreation. Just a point of clarity, it says to allow small projects to be reviewed and approved by the director. Does that mean the planning director, or because special recreation would also involve the parks group, park staff, but I assume that the
Well, if it's a public project, it's exempt. It's not, the SR zone review doesn't apply to public parks projects. It's just private land. So we still coordinate with the department as necessary, but there's no formal planning commission review now for public SR zone projects.
On page 11, 3015.020, we're talking about public dance in the special recreation zone, and it was noted that dancing allowed in a public park is associated with a special event. Now, that cover and would require an event permit. So that covers public parks in the special recreation zone. But what about things like Oakmont Country Club, for example, or other special recreation areas as it relates to being able to dance, being able to have dancing without any sort of use permit or their, that type of thing? Terrible sentence structure.
Yeah, no, I think I understand the concept. What are we doing on this? We're making it consistent with the other zones.
Made in the commercial zones, the downtown specific plan, where we had done a comprehensive review of land uses and removed the conditional use permit process from public dance. I think this was maybe a leftover from that. But there is Title V of the Glendale Municipal Code requires a public dance permit from the city clerk's office as well. So that's another layer of
regardless
review.
So that's still in place for the special recreation zone regardless.
Correct, as well as all other zones.
Great. So there's still great. And I do want to add that I'm really pleased with on page 12, 30.61.010, the public notice.
Yes.
And the fact now it's being extended to occupants as well as building owners. Long overdue. Really glad to see that. That's proactive.
We were going to talk about that in a little bit more depth later, if that's necessary. That was one of those more controversial
items. That you're doing it, or
no, I'll let Chris Bagdikian do that.
If there's something you really want to add while we're going through it, now's a good time. Otherwise, I'm very pleased about it. I suspect my fellow commissioners are as well.
Yeah. Again, some of the things were eliminating the trash enclosure necessity for 1 and 2 unit projects in many cases. Again, a lot of these things are clarifications. We're adding a sentence or modifying some of the language that we think helps improve the interpretation. Again, the title changes. Director of Community Development replaces Director of Planning, Director of Community Planning. Again, with the reorganization combination with redevelopment agency, you'll find Director of Community Development replaces the old redevelopment department head, two older titles, because now the Director of Community Development is the head of the whole organization. Functionally, probably nothing will change, but as far as the code is concerned, so that simplifies it somewhat. And zoning administrator's been replaced by either generally Director of Community Development, where it's an administrative, non-hearing application, and replaced with hearing officer, where there's a hearing involved. So some of that has already been done, but obviously there were a lot of sections we didn't change when we went to that hearing officer process. So a lot of these sections are just to change some of the titles.
Mr. Chair,
please.
In the spirit of moving this thing along, are we voting separately on this miscellaneous cleanup revisions?
Well, I think we should see how the evening rolls along. But in that same spirit, what I'd like to suggest is that everything that we have under the title miscellaneous cleanup and revisions, which is also page 10 through page basically 18 of the report, unless my fellow commissioners have anything specific they want to add or any concerns, I suggest maybe we move on to some of the more worthy of discussion items.
I agree.
Great. Let's do so.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, Chairman Kane, if you'd like to select the order, because we're prepared to jump around with those items, whatever order you'd like to hear them, and then we'll have different staff address those.
Sure. I know there's sentiment on one or more of the commissioners to try to move this forward and get it dealt with in total today. I have to say that, at least with one exception, I would prefer not to do that, and that's because I think Ms. Landrigan has special observations and some concerns over at least one or two of them, and I would like her to have her opportunity to chime in and share with us her opinions on at least a couple of them. Absent that, I think we can handle most or a good number of these before the hour or the evening exhausts us further. I do want to, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, do you know what those items are?
Well, at least I know she'll have interest in talking to the artificial turf. But what I would do is similar to what we did before, is we can have our input, our conversations. We'll continue and allow her to pipe in on whatever other things she has as well. But I know she'll want to focus on that. At the same time, we do have some public speaker cards, and you'll be, we'll certainly allow you to speak on whatever's on your mind. I see at least two or three different items, one of which is artificial turf. So there'll be a period of time we'll allow you to speak on that, of course. But let's, you know what, I'd say let's start from the top and see what our concerns are as we move forward.
So would you like to leave artificial turf to last, at least, and then hear from the four commissioners that are here, or do you want to just start with that?
No, you know what? What I would like to do is, and I'm going to interject.
Or just go by staff report order.
Mr. Ortega, was there a few specific areas you wanted to speak to, sir? Hookah? Okay. I just wanted to see if you had, a hot button. So, all right. What I want to focus on initially, and because I'm going to interject and allow the public speakers, rather than have them sit here for an X period of time, I'd like to deal with the hookah lounges first, and then synthetic turf. And that's primarily because that's what the speaker cards are for.
Okay. I guess I'll just sort of.
Who's our designated?
I'll give a summary
speaker.
for hookah lounges, or to start with that topic.
And what page is that on, by the way?
In the staff report, it starts on page 6.
6. Thank you.
From time to time, working the public counter, answering phone calls, working with the public, we get inquiries of, how could I permit, X, how could I permit Y? And of recent years, there's been a lot of interest in how can I permit a hookah lounge, how could I could open something up, and the advice that we give them is okay, you've got it involves smoking, and hookah, as best I can describe it, is smoking a plant-based material through a water pipe. The requests are generally to be done outside, and it's just a matter of being compliant with state law, which regulates smoking indoors and generally relates to labor codes. But Glendale has an additional layer, which is the fresh air ordinance that has a lot more restrictions. So we took this opportunity with all these inquiries to, when we convened the Zoning Code Advisory Group, have a discussion on what do you think about permitting hookah lounges. It would, potentially mean expanding or changing some of the smoking requirements here in Glendale. So we had a discussion with the group, and there was no consensus among them. It was kind of a split. There was some that felt that it was part of a larger social activity and a larger cultural identity, and that the city should investigate ways to permit this kind of activity. And others felt equally as strong that it was an air quality issue and was counterproductive to all the work that's gone into the most recent fresh air ordinance that was adopted in 2008. The report outlines the state requirements, and it also outlines our local requirements, which do go beyond the state requirements for restrictions when you are smoking outdoors. And I know that neighborhood services staff is here that worked very closely with with creating that ordinance and getting that passed, and can attest to when people do come to them of where are some of my location requirements. That it's a pretty limited area when somebody asks to do that. So if the commission is interested in expanding this for use, the report outlines just many of the code sections that relate to fresh air that would need to be amended in order to consider something like that. And that's pretty much it for summarizing what I have to say. I know there's a lot of people in the audience that want to make some comments as well.
Let's do initial conversation or questions for staff. Mr. Lee?
Yes, you mentioned that there might be some, cultural, traditional type of issues that might be involved with this hookah, and that was something that I kind of wanted to touch on. I love, the fresh air ordinance that we have because I'm a non-smoker. But at the same time, I want to be culturally sensitive, and I guess I wanted to find out if you've done some in-depth study as to, what is it that is hookah lounge? Are they smoking really tobacco-based, or is it more herbal-based? And is burning or any type of herbal type of plant where I come from is really is good for your good for your body. Actually, I do take a lot of herbal based supplements. Now, one of the things that I like to ask this question. Incense that people burn for aromatic purposes. For some cultures, is something that's really required in their procedures when they pay respect to the disease or their ancestors and things like that. And there are several occasions where you have to burn incense, and more so for people of the Buddhist background. Burning incense in public area, enclosed area, is that allowed or is that not allowed?
I'm going to defer to Sam from the Neighborhood Services Division.
Chair Kane, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Sam Engel. I'm the Neighborhood Services Administrator. With me is Armene Jimenez. She is the Fresh Air Ambassador, the person that really and deals with the nuts and bolts implementation of the city's fresh air ordinance, and has been working with us now for over 2 years. So but we may trade back and forth a little bit on some of the answers. She's very familiar with how the ordinance actually applies whenever it's applied to a particular business and everything else. First off, the fresh air ordinance actually prohibits the smoking of any plant-based material. So it's not limited to just tobacco, it's any plant-based material. And it has to do with the act of smoking. It doesn't really relate to the act or the burning of incense. However, there are some exceptions that actually take the burning of incense in conjunction with a religious rite and exempts the city from regulating that. The ordinance actually carves that out. We don't get involved in that.
Now, when you say plant-based, when you're saying that burning of the plant, which is herbal, herbal is herbaceous plant. Now, are you talking about inhaling or just even burning of the herbal plant is prohibited here?
Go ahead, and you want to answer that one?
It's smoking and exposing others to secondhand smoke, not necessarily burning.
So, actually, when you burn those herbal, plants, it causes smoke, and everybody in the room will smell that. It's just like inhaling and exhaling, same thing.
Fresh air ordinance refers to smoking and exposing others to secondhand smoke. It doesn't say anything about burning.
It doesn't regulate incense at all. And if it's an incense type of activity, fresh air ordinance only relates to the act of inhaling and what results from that.
Well, you mentioned the plant-based.
Right.
And that's why I was asking, because a lot of the herb come from, it's all plants.
Right.
It's just, those are plants. And some of those plants are, instead of inhaling, like tobacco, it's burned. And, the room is full of smoke.
I think, let me just say, I think you've got to apply a standard of reasonableness here, which is what we would do. And if we were to go out there and somebody were to have a pot of incense and everybody were sitting around breathing it in, I would say that would constitute the act of smoking. I have to just, if they're there to cover up the fact that it's moldy in the room and they're burning incense, and I have to tell you that from wearing my other hat on code enforcement, it's not unusual for people to do all kinds of things to cover up the smell of different things in their houses, burning incense being one of them. That would not be the act of smoking as defined under our ordinance.
The reason I was going that direction and asking that question was that some of these, things I spoke of are culturally based activities, either from Orient or from Middle East, and these places. So I wanted to be culturally sensitive. Sure. At the same time that, I, as I mentioned in the beginning, I love our fresh air ordinance because I'm a non-smoker. But where is it that we can have exceptions where we can allow and respect some of the cultural activities?
One, the City Council was very clear whenever they crafted the fresh air ordinance to carve out anything to do with religious institutions. So any rite, if you're in the Catholic Church, you're familiar with the censer, which is what the priest waves as he walks up and down the aisle as part of a service, and other religious as well. So the council carved all of that out.
Just religious or also cultural activities?
Just religious. The other thing that is carved out is what you do inside your own home or your own unit, whether it's a single-family home or an apartment. Council said that, at least where we are right now, and I think it's a moving target, to be honest with you, as people become more sensitive to this issue over time, is that inside your own unit, it's not going to do that. Beyond that, the whole ordinance is silent on the issue of anything having to do with what might be cultural.
What are the areas that this is limited to, the hookah lounges?
First, let's deal broadly with the zoning code. Zoning code says all activities must be conducted indoors, with the exception of 4 or 5 things. You guys know these: Christmas tree lots, auto sales, outdoor dining, blah, blah, blah. And there's 4 or 5, and that's it. Everything else has to be conducted indoors. The state of California says any place that is a place of employment or a place of food preparation must be smoke-free. So for all practical purposes, there is no way that you can do hookah as an indoor activity. So let's toss that all out. So next you go to, can you do it outdoors? By your zoning code right now, unless you decide to make this a permitted outdoor activity, and that's part of your discussion tonight, you can't do it outdoors, because you can only do 5 things outdoors: sell cars, sell Christmas trees, sell pumpkins, sell plants and produce. What's the other one? There's 4. Dining. And everything else has to be indoors. So unless you carve out hookah as an outdoor use, I mean, that's part of what you've got to do as well. I mean, that's a major change for if you go, it's a, you know, for allowing additional outdoor uses. Under the city's fresh air ordinance at this point, smoking is only allowed in outdoor dining areas. And not any place. You can't have smoking permitted areas any place. The only places that you are allowed to smoke, and the City Council recognized this, is in an outdoor dining area. No more than 25% of the seating of that outdoor dining area. So if there's 10 seats out there, you can smoke at 2 of them, subject to a distance requirement. 10 feet?
20 feet from all doors and windows.
Okay, 20 feet from doors, windows, openings, and vents, and then 10 feet from any other diners with a physical separation between. So you can do that, and answer your question, Member Yasayan. That's it currently. That 25%.
And when she was talking about limited areas, that's what
it would be, in conjunction with outdoor dining. So there's no other way at this point to actually have hookah as an independent activity. You can't do it outside.
So I'm aware of just one hookah place in Glendale.
Yes.
And so is it currently they're allowed to do that, but
currently they have been cited pending your discussion and ultimate approval by the City Council.
So they've been cited now as a potential problem, and
yes, assuming we're talking about the same one.
Right. Well, the one I know is
I can know at least
on Colorado.
That would be the one.
Don't name names. Right. Okay.
That would be the one.
Okay. And now my other question is that I'm assuming the purpose of the clean air ordinance is to prevent secondhand smoking. I mean, people who don't want to be near smoke, and who have to still, not because of their own choice, but because someone else is near them is smoking, they have to inhale it, whether that's in the apartment building or sitting outside in a restaurant, or when you're walking on the sidewalk. Now, going into a hookah lounge, I'm assuming you're going in there with the assumption that there is going to be a lot of secondhand smoke. What would be your opinion? How would that be different? I mean, I'm seeing a clear difference with what the purpose of that ordinance is trying to prevent, which I think is doing a really good job, and a place like a hookah lounge where you go knowingly that you're going to be actually exposed to these things.
But doesn't that expose, in that situation, isn't that a question of exposing employees?
Well, Member Yasayan, members of the Planning Commission, first, I want to get out of this question because you're asking me to comment on what the City Council did, and I will never do that. City Council specifically made this, and as you consider this, it might be helpful if you're thinking about doing it, and go back and look at the City Council's discussions, because they talked about this, and and they made some comments as through their discussion of what they wanted this city to be and what they didn't want this city to be. And they didn't want this city to be an area where anyone would be exposed to secondhand smoke. And I won't figure out, and I never try to figure out what they did and why they did it, and that's not appropriate for me to answer that for you. I think you need to look at that as you consider this as to what the intent was or what it was. Let me get to something else, though. You talked about the idea of a hookah lounge. Remember, the only place it can be done is outside if you elect to do that on the zoning code. You can't cover that. It has to be open air, and as soon as you cover it, it becomes an enclosed space. Then it becomes indoors again. So it's a kind of it's a difficult issue to wrestle with, because the area lounge really is kind of an archaic terminology at this point in California, because you can't do it inside. Just can't. So it's a hookah patio or it's nothing in California.
So just one more question. I've seen like indoor smoking places in like Pasadena, things like that. What do they get an exception? Or,
right. And in Glendale, we have an allowance for that as well.
Yeah,
we actually have an allowance for that as well. City Council, whenever they crafted the ordinance, allows for an indoor smoking.
But more like a tobacco lounge.
It's a tobacco lounge. They can have no more than I'll let Armine talk about this because she deals with this day to day. But if you are a tobacco products retailer, you don't sell anything else. You don't sell chewing gum. You don't sell Jolt Cola or water, food, or anything. All you do is sell tobacco products. And the idea was if you want to go in and check out a cigar or something like that, you've got a place to be able to do that on site because that's a part of the business. There's an expectation you're going to be able to do that. But it's a minimal part, and I'll let Armine talk about the actual dimensions of that. And that's currently legal under our code. And the way our code is written is it separates the exposure for the employees so that it's enclosed, the employees aren't exposed to that.
Commissioner Usayan, to answer your question, it is considered a tobacco lounge, and it can only be 15% of the square footage with separate ventilation. The only thing that could be sold there is tobacco accessories and paraphernalia, and also dry tea. Other than that, nothing else can be sold. So nobody can walk in and ask for a bottle of water or chewing gum or something else that you might find at a convenience store. So
15% of it
the square
can be
footage.
used
It could be
for
a separate
smoking?
room, 15% of the square footage with separate ventilation.
Percent.
That answers the question.
I have a quick question. The idea of enclosing a space, that would extend to an awning?
As soon as it's covered, yes, sir.
Right. Yeah, so even an awning that in some cases might be considered an extension of an eave, that counts as covering in terms of this part of the ordinance.
Yes.
But as long as there's an opening at the top, I mean, if it's closed on all four sides, and there's a door you have to get in, but it doesn't have a ceiling, is that considered enclosed as well?
Then you start getting into the definition within your own zoning code of what constitutes enclosed. It's the problem that you face trying to figure out how to legalize it if that's your intent.
So what is it? So what would that be considered now?
Be enclosed.
Closed, that would
It's
be
enclosed or enclosed. Or
even if it doesn't have ceiling.
it's why it's not an easy issue to resolve. If indeed you decide that you want to do it.
Further questions for staff or further remarks from staff? Subject? Let's divert and let's have, there is interest on the public on this particular item, and let's allow them to have their say. We'll start with Robert Ortega.
Hello, gentlemen, everyone. My name is Dr. Robert Ortega, DRPH, MPH, MBA. And Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all tonight. I'm here basically as a volunteer spokesperson for the American Heart Association. And I have a couple talking points of why we should uphold this ordinance in the city and continue this battle in favor of fresh air. First off, hookah tobacco contains the same chemicals found in all tobacco, including nicotine and other carcinogens. Hookah smoke contains the same cancer-causing particles found in secondhand cigar smoke and cigarette smoke. The charcoal used in the tobacco heating process produces the toxin carbon monoxide. Patrons of hookah are predominantly young, and this would set a poor example for our local residents. I'm a local resident of Glendale, born and raised, 1515 East Glen Oaks. When you passed the fresh air ordinance, it was something I was quite proud of. It established Glendale here in California as you could say, a city upon a hill, in the sense that we were standing here in favor of promoting fresh air. And to go against this would set poor precedent and a bad example for our citizens and other cities, you could even say, was that they would say Glendale's going back on what they were promoting at first. I say that all of you tonight are really in favor of this. I was listening to Mr. Lee earlier and saying how he's in favor of being smoke-free as a city because he's a non-smoker. And if people choose to do this, they could go to other cities. But Glendale has always been a different type of city, a city that really leads. And we passed that fresh air ordinance, and we could take this and we could promote this and really show our true leadership. We're not just any ordinary city, but we're a city that I know that each and every one of us is very proud of. As a local citizen and a resident of Glendale, it's something I'm proud of, and I'm here tonight to really speak in favor of promoting fresh air. And I know each and every one of you, deep down in your hearts, really believes in this too. So I really hope you consider this, and let's stand upon our beliefs and what we really promote, and we truly understand. And hopefully we'll be able to uphold the fresh air ordinance. Thank you. I'll yield the balance of my time.
Thank you. Esther Schiller.
I'm hoping that my remarks and the documents that I'm providing can be placed in the record of this evening's meeting. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Esther Schiller. I'm Executive Director of a nonprofit educational organization called Smoke Free Air for Everyone. We were founded in 1992 by people who were seriously affected by secondhand smoke, and our mission is to provide information about how hazardous tobacco smoke is. Recently, the American Lung Association gave grades to all the cities in California based on each city's efforts to protect their residents from tobacco smoke. Glendale was one of the few cities in California that got an A. And you should be very proud of that. But allowing hookah smoking, inside or outside, would probably result in Glendale getting much less than an A. And it would be a terrible model for other cities to emulate. Any kind of tobacco smoke is a health hazard. And if you're breathing fire, you are going to be injuring your lungs. Sometimes something that's been done as a cultural activity for years and years and years is found to be not really good for one's health. And there comes a moment when one has to look around and say, hey, should we really be doing this? In 2006, the California Air Resources Board, after years of research, said that tobacco smoke is a toxic air contaminant outside with no safe level of exposure. They said it's as dangerous as the worst industrial air pollutants and can cause illness and death outside. And it's so much more dangerous when it's trapped in any kind of an indoor environment. And as the gentleman has said previously, the tobacco in a hookah pipe contains the same chemicals found in all tobacco, including nicotine. So hookah smoking can be addictive, and smoking hookah for 45 to 60 minutes can be the equivalent of smoking 100 or more cigarettes. So we can say that smoking hookah is harmful for health. Secondhand hookah smoke contains the same cancer-causing chemicals found in the secondhand smoke in cigarettes. In addition, the charcoal used in the tobacco heating process produces carbon monoxide, which is a toxin, another toxin. In 2005, the World Health Organization issued an advisory note about hookah use, stating that people who smoke hookah pipes or who are exposed to secondhand hookah smoke are at risk for the same diseases that are caused by smoking cigarettes, including cancer, heart disease, respiratory disease, and adverse effects during pregnancy. Plus, sharing a water pipe mouthpiece poses a serious risk of transmission of communicable diseases, including TB and hepatitis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stephen Gallegos.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Gallegos. I'm a resident of Glendale, and I am also a program coordinator with Glendale Adventist Medical Center. I've brought for your record, which I'd like this to be included, is a letter from Maury Dean, who's the CEO of Glendale Adventist Medical Center, who's also expressed his opposition to any hookah lounges. So I'll pass this to the... But besides being a resident, I'm also the chair of the Coalition for Tobacco-Free Los Angeles County, and I'm here to speak in that role. First of all, I'd like to say that Glendale should be proud of receiving an A grade on the American Lung Association's State of Tobacco Control report card for the third straight year for its ordinances protecting the residents and visitors of Glendale. This distinct recognition was for the excellence and hard work in making this city, our city, my city, a model throughout Los Angeles and the state of California for protecting the public from unwanted exposure to the dangerous poisons in secondhand smoke. There are misperceptions that hookah is safer than cigarettes. In fact, research and scientific data have demonstrated that hookah delivers 3 times more carbon monoxide and about the same dangerous levels of nicotine as cigarettes. The one thing we do when we come to speak before this body in providing information and education about these issues is that we have to stand on science. We have to stand on the research and the studies that have happened in this country for over 40 years, so that when we do come and speak before you, it's not just ideas or perceptions or off-the-cuff ideas, but we stand on that bedrock of science and research. And that's the information that we bring to this commission. The city of Glendale has a high standard of excellence, has set a high standard of excellence in protecting the public's health from exposure to secondhand smoke. And our city is second to none in the state and serves as a shining example to other cities considering similar protections. Let's keep our statewide reputation intact and continue to be the respected leader in protecting the health of our residents. Thank you.
Thanks.
Very much. I don't have any other speaker cards on that, and I think it would be appropriate to just briefly ask commissioners to weigh in on their thoughts on hookah lounges. Mr. Sheets? Oh, I'm sorry.
Consider all the hard work. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. You consider all the hard work Mr. Engel and his staff did, and you consider the leadership that our council put forth on this issue. Mr. Engel gave us a small example of some of the struggles that he had to deal with and some of the uncertainties and lack of clarity around this issue. I think a lot of hard work went into it for the right reasons, and it's smoking. I don't think anything should change in our policy.
I completely agree as well, as far as policy goes, and Glendale being a leader, this stuff, and I think, this isn't the only thing that we should be a leader in. There's a lot of other things we can be a leader in too, that promotes health and recreational activities in the city, biking and finding more pedestrian activities or safer ways for pedestrians to move around. So I hope this amount of passion and interest that people showed here today can also be, showed the same way for all the other things as well, because I really appreciate that. To me, I think one thing that really stands out is that it just seems a bit inconsistent that we allow a cigar bar, or not a cigar bar since they can't serve alcohol or drinks, but we allow a place to sell cigars and we allow them to smoke it indoors, but yet we don't allow a hookah place where you go there knowing that you're going to be smoking hookah or you're going to be around hookah, and I suppose that you're going to be going in to a cigar place with the same type of intention. So there's a big inconsistency there for me, and it doesn't make to me it doesn't make sense. I understand that you can't have it indoors based on California law, but not allowing it outdoors in an enclosed area, in an area where it's completely away from people who would potentially get secondhand smoke from, and not allowing those customers to have that opportunity seems inconsistent with what we're already allowing with that cigar place. And for me, it doesn't make sense. And I would have a hard time maybe denying a hookah place for that reason. And because I also, if we're trying to deny bad behavior or stop people from committing something that may be harmful for them, we're not doing it with the cigar place. But I'm not even sure if we can do other ways to. Let me back up. We're doing a lot in terms of teaching people on the effects of hookah, which is great, and the health effects, but ultimately it also comes to their choice. And they're choosing to go smoke it in a place, hopefully, that is not going to affect other people who don't want to be near there. And if we don't have, maybe for the same intention we're allowing that cigar place to be in Glendale, is because if we don't allow it, then they're probably going to go to another cigar place in some other city. And I think the same argument can be made for hookah place in Glendale too. So I understand why we would allow a cigar place, but I wouldn't see any reason why we would deny a hookah place but still allow a cigar place, as long as it's not affecting anyone who should not or doesn't want to be affected by it. So, that's all I would. I would be willing to look at ways in terms of how the code would define enclosures and at least make it consistent with what we already allow.
Lee?
Be simple. No hookah.
All right. The only observation I would make, and first off, again, I don't see the role for hookah, is is I think, the scenario that's being painted. You're talking about cigar place and hookah place, and the idea is that a cigar store is there not to provide a social atmosphere. It's there to provide the opportunity for somebody to try a cigar and then take it into their private residences or off into the woods or someplace where it truly doesn't impact anyone. And, I think all of us up here, in general, favor the idea of doing things as long as it doesn't impact anyone else. The issue here is what's being proposed or potentially being proposed. It would be difficult to avoid it from impacting someone else. I can be corrected by staff or community services, but somebody selling hookah pipes falls under a cigar store and operates like a cigar store. They still can sell hookah pipes. It's part of like being a cigar or cigarette store, correct? Right. So what we're stopping is kind of the social aspect of it. And I know that my personal prejudices are carried forward with me when I make deliberations, but I also think that sometimes cultures need to evolve. It may be okay in a culture for somebody to beat their wife, but there reaches a point where we have to say, no, that's not appropriate in our culture. And smoking in public and inflicting that smoke on other people, I think we're pretty much all clearly saying it's time for that to stop. So I don't see any role in my part for quote-unquote a lounge to come into existence.
I passed by that smoking place a couple of times. It's on Brand. And if you walk in, I don't know if you've had the opportunity, but in the back, it looks like a big lounge. And I know people pack there. And they stay up late and sit down and smoke. So what I'm saying is that, if we're not going to allow hookah, then we should make it consistent at least.
That's a very fair point.
And if we're not allowing lounge, them to just hang out there or whatever, then it should be consistent with smoking stores as well.
I agree with that observation. Mr. Engel?
Chair Yasayan, or Chair Kane, Member Yasayan, you bring up an interesting thing. One of the things that our staff does is monitor the real estate ads, and the cigar store or the cigar lounge on Brand Boulevard is currently being marketed as a business for sale, in which, and it says right in the ad, that you can legally smoke tobacco indoors. Now, obviously, we print that out. That's evidence for us then to go back and proceed with our code enforcement case. So we're aware of that. And hopefully, as whoever buys it goes into it with their eyes wide open, says, yes, I can be a restaurant, which is what it started as, or I can be a bar, or I can be any one of these other things, but what I cannot be is a place where you come in and smoke cigars. So we're aware of that. It's in the real estate ads all over the place right now. It's being for sale. And we have
So your statement is the way they're currently operating, they are in violation,
right.
And you plan on enforcing.
Right.
All right.
And we'll do that at the time, probably at the time of sale or transfer. So whoever comes in and buys it with the understanding that this is what they're going to be. They're not buying something thinking that they're going to get something they can legally do, and we head it off that way.
Why not cite them now?
Well, we already are aware of that now.
So you're saying that the lounge activity with the smoking is not allowed?
Unless it's inside the 15% enclosed area, you
Right.
can't do it.
Right.
With the ventilation. And
with a separate ventilation system.
It's a enforcement issue as opposed to a code issue.
Right.
They're doing something illegal, and we need
Right.
to address it that way.
Right.
Okay. Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Police department individual that.
Oh, please, if you wanted to weigh in on that, please.
Commissioners, Lieutenant Bruce Fox, West Area
You've been
Command.
sitting here through the whole evening just for this moment?
No, I was actually here, believe it or not, I was here for the Child Care Center, but I have such an interest in this, I stayed. I just wanted...
thought you were providing security, because, the child care people.
I had the back, sir. You're all safe. I think I loaded it today, but I'm not sure. No, I just wanted to give some historical perspective as the former Vice Lieutenant. I heard the comments being made, and I just want to give a little historical perspective that over my tenure as the Vice ABC compliance officer, every hookah establishment in Glendale has always been, and the one that remains today, is a restaurant. So we're not talking about, there's really no comparison between the already violating cigar lounge and the hookah lounge that exists and the ones that have been shut down over the years. They've all been restaurants by their CUPs and through ABC. So you're talking about restaurants where hookah activity is being allowed to be conducted, not just hookah lounges. Every hookah establishment, including, we had one hookah lounge up in the north area that was operating only as hookah only, and what they were doing is illegally selling food to their customers. So I've never seen one that's just hookah alone. It's always been in conjunction with restaurant or alcohol service.
So what you're saying then, if there's a perception out there that people say, well, there are hookah lounges, I've seen them, I've been there, back to the same point I just made, it's an enforcement issue.
Yes, sir.
It's not a code issue. The code is clear, and we're trying to deal with that from an enforcement standpoint, but that's the issue.
Correct, yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Absent further comment from staff, I guess I'd like the commission to weigh in on their opinions as it relates to it further, maybe a little more formally via just a motion on hookah lounge.
Yeah, I'd like to move that...
Oh, wait.
Sorry. Since this is basically, staff brought this entire package together as one, staff's just looking for a recommendation on the entire thing, and so obviously any comments you have will be forwarded to the council as well.
Okay, so we've weighed in and we can move on to the next one.
We don't.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
We just like voting on it. All right, let's since we have a speaker card on synthetic turf, artificial grass, whatever we want to call it, or term it nowadays, AstroTurf. Let's talk about that.
Thank you. I'm Ron Rodacker, and I represent Easy Turf Corporation. Parent company is Field Turf. I'm here to encourage the city of Glendale to allow synthetic grass in the front yard. You're already doing it in the backyard, so there's the inconsistency that was referred to in this situation. It was almost about a year ago that Mrs. gave me a call and said that you were considering reviewing this topic. I had just finished working with the city of Covina, and we did a huge research on the various cities that were putting the grass in, of which I gave the program to Kristen. All of those records were from Anaheim and from Covina, West Covina, and a number of cities that have gone through the process, and now they all allow synthetic grass for the front yard installation. I think most of the rules and regulations that are on the books in most cities were created back in the 70s and 80s, and when in fact it came up and you used, Mr. Kane, the comment AstroTurf. AstroTurf came out in Texas, and it was really, as Vince Lombardi referred to it, is really just fuzzy concrete. And a lot of guys got hurt severely. Since that time, though, it has really progressed. And I think at time that a lot of people said, well, if it looks as bad in the front yard as it does on the football stadium, then in fact we don't want it in our yards. I think if you've noticed synthetic grass, there's tremendous improvement that in a lot of cases you really can't tell whether it's real or not. But what are the advantages of it? The advantages of it, as I say, I represent Easy Turf. We're out of Escondido. We are the largest seller of synthetic grass in Southern California. The parent company is Field Turf. Field Turf is the largest manufacturer of synthetic grass. They also are the largest installer of synthetic grass. They manufacture more than the other 8 companies combined. When I say field, that's what they do. If you take any athletic field, whether it's soccer in Europe or South America, the NFL, college, high school, baseball, they probably install about 85 to 90%. That's what they do. They've established dealerships, which is one, Easy Turf is, and now we're a part of the company, that we deal with homes. So that's the story of Field Turf and Easy Turf.
I need to interject. You literally have only a couple of moments for public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
So really, rather than tell us about your company, focus on what you see as the positives.
All right. The positive
I'll give you another minute or
so.
so.
No, I appreciate that. The positive on, number one, you're going to reduce the water needs, which everybody's battling with, about shortage of water. In looking at the notes here, it shows that there's a potential of increased storm water runoff, which is really not true because you have less runoff with synthetic turf because of the way it's installed you do with just a regular ground, because ground is a sponge. The other thing is the amount of energy in manufacturing. It really doesn't cost that much. One other question is noted here is it's not recyclable. If you looked at the New England Patriots football game the other week, they were playing on field turf. I was down in San Diego the other day. We looked at 20-some tons of the previous field that is 100% recyclable. It's not allergenic, it's not abrasive. When you put it in, you don't really have chemicals from fertilizers, chemicals from bugs and things like that. And so really, the health hazards are really of not concern. The one other comment that comes up quite often is, does it get hot? Yeah, it does. However, in a sense, it really doesn't get any hotter than concrete or the other hard surfaces. The way you can control that is, number one, we have a sand that is inserted into the blades that really reduces the temperature of that. And that's pretty much the way it is. The durability is we have a 15-year warranty. That means that the turf will be there probably for 20 to 25 years. So that's pretty much my arguments on the usage of it. Yes,
I have a few questions here. First of all, there are some concerns with the artificial turf of some chemicals leaching out of the the material, synthetic material here. You can address that, and then the other part is that it says here it doesn't fade, but how does it react with other chemicals like solvents and things like that that might be accidentally poured on there, or even for some reason that the turf is damaged. I'm assuming it's just a polymer based. So if let's say fire gets on there, it gets scorched, and when you do, let's say, maintenance on it, how is it, when you, let's say, cut out a section to replace it, how durable is it? How do you sew it together? And how will it look after the grass has been there 3 years versus a new patch that you put on there? It's all about the aesthetics of the lawn. So that's the type of things that I am a little bit concerned as far as because it being the artificial material, synthetic material, and what type of a study? I know that you guarantee 25 years here. Do you really have this synthetic grass that's been sitting in somebody's yard for 25 years? What is the basis that you are claiming your 25 years?
The turf manufactured by Field Turf's been around about 35, 40 years. So they have turf that's been in the field for length of time. Now, does that mean that every job is 25, 30 years? Not really. A lot of that's determined on the the yarn that you use to manufacture the blades. But the warranty that we have is 15 years that you will have less than 10% color fade from ultraviolet. The other thing that is, if there is a stain, dog urine, pool chemicals, which we really haven't found any, even to the point that we've done all the humane societies in San Diego, they actually bleach their turf once a week. Their homeowners don't do that because you're not interested in parvo and roundworms and things like that. They're trying to kill diseases. As far as chemicals, you don't need chemicals. When we suggest, if you spray, we say Simple Green. Simple Green, most everybody's using it in their homes, and that just kind of disinfects it, if you will. We use silica sand as a fill, mainly because our backing is 100% permeable, so in other words, if water is spilled on it, or dog urine or anything else, it just goes right through wherever it goes. There are some on the market, and like I say, I don't want to talk about other competitors, that basically they have what they call a plug system, where they shoot little holes about every 4 inches in their turf. If sometimes they have problems because if a dog uses the yard and it just puddles there and it's not constantly, then you can have a strong odor problem. And like I say, you could have some problems. Ours goes, and I said I can't speak for other companies because I know what they have, but it's not for me.
I was actually referring to the chemical leaching out of your material, not necessarily chemicals spilled on your material.
No, we haven't had that. In fact,
So it's pretty much
tests,
indoor
I think,
material?
in the reports that really there's not any type of a seepage that would it's an oil-based product. And that's why, in a sense, there's very little drainage, mainly because then you're not going to lose the color, and that's what would happen. But yeah, there's nothing that really comes out of the turf that.
And there's a data study that you can back this up.
Pardon me?
There's a technical data that you can back this up that nothing leaches out of your material into the soil.
I can get that for you.
Well, I'll jump on that. So if that's true, then your material lasts forever. It never deteriorates. It never degrades. That,
in a sense, that could be said, but we, because of our warranty, we go 15 years and say the lifestyle is 20.
well, my point is, any man-made product, any God-made product, deteriorates over time. It erodes. It changes into something else. So over time, there is going to be a leaching. There is going to be something coming off your product, and I just think you're overlooking something when you claim that nothing is coming off the product. Something has to. It may not happen in year one. It may not happen
I
in year
understand what
10.
you're saying. Sure.
But at some point, clearly,
Basically,
it's gonna
I'm
degrade.
sure over a period of time you'll have a breakdown, and what happens at that point in time is the backing starts separating. That's generally what happens with synthetic turf. A lot of them will, depends on how they install them. Different people install different ways, but oftentimes the backing gives way and it starts coming apart, and therefore the blades could come out. But like
Other
I said,
questions for the speaker?
Well, he didn't answer one of the questions that I was asking. And that
restate
is, the maintenance part, and that is that if you need to replace some patch of the grass, is that something that I could do, or is that something that your technician has to come back out and sew it together?
we suggest our guys come out. You could. The reason we suggest we come out is because anybody can cut the turf, except that when you try to put it back together again, it's a matter of the seaming. And therefore, in order to make it look as good as it was before, our suggestion is that you would have us come out and do it. But you can do it. I mean, people do it quite a bit.
So I guess I could assume that maintenance costs might be, if your technician has to come out and do that.
Good. In a sense, when we do that, we do the same as a plumber would come out. It's a fee for so much an hour, and basically where it would be, Pleasant Parks.
Other questions for the speaker? All right, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And it occurred to me that I lost total control of this hearing because when we introduced it, he came up, he started speaking, and we went totally out of order. So, staff, would you like to share with us your thoughts on turf?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
His personal charisma just filled the room, apparently. So.
I think Ron covered some of the background, but to give you a city background, in spring of 2009, City Council, in looking at some more comprehensive landscaping rules, made some regulations about artificial turf that permitted it in very limited situations, essentially in the R1 zoning district, which is a single-family zoning district that's in the flatter part of town, permitting it there only when not visible from the public street, essentially the backyard. So very limited locations where it's permitted. Subsequently after that, Council asked staff to look into could artificial turf be expanded into other areas, and subsequently we put together a demonstration project with 3 vendors displaying 3 different varieties of their product. You may have walked by it when you came in here tonight. And doing the demonstration project, that's been around for just about a year. We took this item, similar to how we reviewed it the first time, to a landscape advisory group made up of local landscape architects, including Commissioner Landergren was one of the members of the landscape advisory group, and discussed it again. What are, with the idea of, could this be expanded to other areas? Let's have that discussion. Their concerns were still the same. They think that there are some unintended consequences for using artificial turf, and they agreed that there are some benefits like using less water and it is less maintenance to a property owner, but some negative effects that could be the potential toxins are released into the water table, the heat island effect that the product heats up, and could result in the energy use is really if it heats up the outside area and you're next to the building, then are you using more air conditioning to cool down the building because the outside is hotter? Increased stormwater runoff, and that's really just a potential of if it's not installed properly and if it's not draining properly, does that increase more water runoff from a property? And just the amount of energy and resources used to manufacture the product. They just didn't think it's a suitable substitute for landscaping, and specifically considering front yards, their view was that that's the most visible portion of a property. It contributes to the overall streetscape of a neighborhood, and really felt that no changes should be made to expanding its use to the front yard. So took that discussion from the Landscape Advisory Group and moved it up a level to the bigger group, the Zoning Code Advisory Group, that looked at all of these issues. And the Zoning Code Advisory Group, again, had a similar discussion. And again, that discussion was split with the following discussion, that it kind of broke down into sort of commercial areas of town and the residential areas of town. Some discussion was to allow it in residential and industrial zones, particularly areas that have high traffic areas, properties that are adjacent to bus stops, and then even into areas that are the parkway area, so outside the private property realm into the public right-of-way, that the property owner is responsible for sort of maintaining that parkway, maybe consider allowing it there. But some of the Zoning Code Advisory Group members felt that the landscaping requirements of commercial and industrial zones is so small that really artificial turf shouldn't be permitted to be expanded to those areas. And as far as making a recommendation from the Zoning Code Advisory Group, they They didn't want to see a change to the existing front yard or visibility requirements, and suggested that if there was to be an expansion of the use of artificial turf, to consider allowing in the other single-family zones, which are more of the hillside designations, which is the R1, R1R and ROS zones, allowing that, but only in the flat portions that are of that property. They wanted it to be in combination with natural live plant materials, which the ordinance currently does, and then also wanted to consider completely prohibiting it from multifamily zones, which the ordinance currently does. So the only draft language that was included in the staff report is, should the Planning Commission want to consider expanding the use of artificial turf based on the Zoning Code Advisory Group's discussion, would be to allow it in the other single-family zones in the flat portions.
Questions? Comments? Well, let's hear some comments.
That's the way I feel. I would be open to getting input from Commissioner Landrigan, knowing that she's significantly involved in the process and in that field, but right now I see no reason to change it based on what I'm hearing and what I've read and what I understand.
Also, Kate, I'd like to hear what Landry. Yeah.
Okay, we're reaching that hour, aren't we? I have been saying that, I'm willing to let people do things in the privacy of their own yards, as long as it doesn't impact other people. However, I recognize there's a certain incongruity to that, in that there are concerns about heat island effect. There are concerns about runoff. That's a really big issue now in California in terms of keeping groundwater on your own property and things like that. But even within that, and recognizing that there's different schools of thoughts, there's a pro for every con and a con for every pro. I felt pretty much the same thing. It's let's maintain status quo. Let's not have it creep into the front yard for another whole variety of reasons, including aesthetics and so on. And even though there's some really great questions about even if it should be used at all, at least allow its continued use for interior property lines where it's not visible from the street. One of the things that had been brought up by the speaker, of course, they're talking about how it's being used in playing fields. And there is a big difference between a playing field and a residential lot in terms of the frequency of use, in terms of its design as far as the runoff and the maintenance and all the other care that goes into it. So in terms of a residential property, and we also spoke in the advisor group about having it creep into commercial uses and so on. And for all those reasons that we were saying before, I think the status quo is pretty liberal, even as it is. I think we've all signed off on that. There are basically two other areas that were broken out. One was community gardens. The other was massage services. I'm going to ask my fellow commissioners. I've looked them over. I have nothing to add to it. I think that's all solid. Mr. Sheets?
I agree, except I would just add that the certification statement is a I think, I don't know if
massage parlors or community gardens.
What time is it? Yeah, I think that on the massage services, that certification aspect is really significant, but I wouldn't change.
Right, and I before we just roll forward, I will obviously like to hear a little bit in terms of brevity, if possible, from any of city staff. And I'm going to suggest Mr. Engel speak, since he's already at the microphone.
Chair Kane, members of the Planning Commission, we have worked with the group that has done the two community gardens. We forwarded the ordinance and the staff report out to them. We got a concern back from them. The one, they really appreciate the work of that the planning division has done in seeing that community gardens can actually happen in what little vacant land we actually have in our community. They did express a concern about the limitation on power tools, which is written into the language you have. They said there is no limitation on power tools in residential zones on for any property you or I might own. Why would you do that on the community garden? And I'm just conveying what they called me and asked me about.
The response to that is, how big a plant do they plan on growing that requires power tools? So.
Well, I think power tools.
It's the building of the.
Yeah, well, I think one was building of the gardens, and
it's not the pruning; that's the creation of the. Okay.
Yeah, that was it.
I think it was chipper shredder.
And they mulch on both of the existing gardens. And I assume if this group goes and develops other gardens, they have a whole biorecycling component that goes with it, and one of them is the use of the chipper shredder. They felt they didn't want to be in violation of a law if this is how it ultimately ended up. And they asked me to come in and express that to you. That's from them. I felt, and I will explain to you what I